Chapter 18, Part 2 of A Diary from Dixie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut. Chapter 18, Columbia, South Carolina, Part 2. August 29th. I take my hospital duty in the morning. Most persons prefer afternoon, but I dislike to give up my pleasant evenings. So I get up at 5 o'clock and go down in my carriage all laden with provisions. Mrs. Fisher and old Mr. Bryan generally go with me. Provisions are commonly sent by people to Mrs. Fisher's. I am so glad to be a hospital nurse once more. I had excuses enough, but at heart I felt a coward and a skulker. I think I know how men feel who hire a substitute and shirk the fight. There must be no dodging of duty. It will not do now to send provisions and pay for nurses. Something inside of me kept calling out, "Go, you shabby creature, you can't bear to see what those fine fellows have to bear." Mrs. Izard was staying with me last night, and as I slipped away I begged Molly to keep everything dead still and not let Mrs. Izard be disturbed until I got home. About 10 I drove up, and there was a row to wake the dead. Molly's eldest daughter, who nurses her baby sister, let the baby fall, and regardless of Mrs. Izard, as I was away, Molly was giving the nurse a switching in the yard, accompanied by howls and yells worthy of a Comanche. The small nurse welcomed my advent, no doubt, for in 2 seconds peace was restored. Mrs. Izard said she sympathized with the baby's mother, so I forgave the uproar. I have excellent servants, no matter for their shortcomings behind my back. They save me all thought as to household matters, and they are so kind, attentive, and quiet. They must know what is at hand if Sherman is not hindered from coming here. Freedom, my masters! But these sphinxes give no sign unless it be increased diligence and absolute silence, as certain in their action and as noiseless as a law of nature, at any rate when we are in the house. That fearful hospital haunts me all day long and is worse at night. So much suffering, such loathsome wounds, such distortion, with stumps of limbs not half cured, exhibited to all. Then when I was so tired yesterday, Molly was looking more like an enraged lioness than anything else, roaring that her baby's neck was broken and howling cries of vengeance. The poor little careless nurse's dark face had an ashen tinge of gray terror. She was crouching near the ground like an animal trying to hide, and her mother striking at her as she rolled away. All this was my welcome as I entered the gate. It takes these half Africans but a moment to go back to their naked, savage, animal nature. Mrs. Izard is a charming person. She tried so to make me forget it all and rest. September 2d. The battle has been raging at Atlanta, and our fate hanging in the balance. After the battle, Atlanta was taken possession of and partly burned by the Federals. Atlanta, indeed, is gone. Well, that agony is over. Like David, when the child was dead, I will get up from my knees, will wash my face and comb my hair. No hope. We will try to have no fear. At the Prestons' I found them drawn up in line of battle every moment looking for the doctor on his way to Richmond. Now, to drown thought, for our day is done, read Dumas' Maître d'Armes. Russia ought to sympathize with us. We are not as barbarous as this, even if Mrs. Stowe's word be taken. Brutal men with unlimited power are the same all over the world. See Russell's India, Bull Run Russell's. They say General Morgan has been killed. We are hard as stones. We sit unmoved and hear any bad news chance may bring. Are we stupefied? September 19th. My pink silk dress I have sold for $600, to be paid for in installments, $200 a month for 3 months, and I sell my eggs and butter from home for $200 a month. Does it not sound well, $400 a month regularly? But in what? In Confederate money. Hélas! September 21st. Went with Mrs. Rhett to hear Dr. Palmer. I did not know before how utterly hopeless was our situation. This man is so eloquent it was hard to listen and not give way. Despair was his word, and martyrdom. He offered us nothing more in this world than the martyr's crown. He is not for slavery, he says. He is for freedom, and the freedom to govern our own country as we see fit. He is against foreign interference in our State matters. That is what Mr. Palmer went to war for, it appears. Every day shows that slavery is doomed the world over. For that he thanked God. He spoke of our agony, and then came the cry, "Help us, O God! Vain is the help of man." And so we came away shaken to the depths. The end has come. No doubt of the fact. Our army has so moved as to uncover Macon and Augusta. We are going to be wiped off the face of the earth. What is there to prevent Sherman taking General Lee in the rear? We have but two armies, and Sherman is between them now. During the summer and autumn of 1864 several important battles had occurred. In addition to the engagements by Sherman's army farther south, there had occurred in Virginia the battle of Cold Harbor in the early part of June, those before Petersburg in the latter part of June and during July and August, the battle of Winchester on September 19th during Sheridan's Shenandoah campaign, and the battle of Cedar Creek on October 19th. September 24th. These stories of our defeats in the valley fall like blows upon a dead body. Since Atlanta fell, I have felt as if all were dead within me forever. Captain Ogden, of General Chesnut's staff, dined here to day. Had ever brigadier, with little or no brigade, so magnificent a staff? The reserves, as somebody said, have been secured only by robbing the cradle and the grave, the men too old, the boys too young. Isaac Hayne, Edward Barnwell, Bacon, Ogden, Richardson, Miles, are the picked men of the agreeable world. October 1st. Mary Cantey Preston's wedding day has come and gone, and Mary is Mrs. John Darby now. Maggie Howell dressed the bride's hair beautifully, they said, but it was all covered by her veil, which was of blond lace, and the dress tulle and blond lace, with diamonds and pearls. The bride walked up the aisle on her father's arm, Mrs. Preston on Dr. Darby's. I think it was the handsomest wedding party I ever saw. John Darby had brought his wedding uniform home with him from England, and it did all honor to his perfect figure. I forget the name of his London tailor. The best, of course. "Well," said Isabella, "it would be hard for any man to live up to those clothes." After the war, Dr. Darby became professor of surgery in the University of the City of New York. He had served as medical director in the Army of the Confederate States, and as professor of anatomy and surgery in the University of South Carolina; had also served with distinction in European wars. And now, to the amazement of us all, Captain Chesnut, Johnny, who knows everything, has rushed into a flirtation with Buck such as never was. He drives her every day, and those wild, runaway, sorrel colts terrify my soul as they go tearing, pitching, and darting from side to side of the street. And my lady enjoys it. When he leaves her he kisses her hand, bowing so low to do it unseen that we see it all. Saturday. The President will be with us here in Columbia next Tuesday, so Colonel McLean brings us word. I have begun at once to prepare to receive him in my small house. His apartments have been decorated as well as Confederate stringency would permit. The possibilities were not great, but I did what I could for our honored chief. Besides, I like the man. He has been so kind to me, and his wife is one of the few to whom I can never be grateful enough for her generous appreciation and attention. I went out to the gate to greet the President, who met me most cordially, kissed me, in fact. Custis Lee and Governor Lubbock were at his back. Immediately after breakfast, the presidential party arrived a little before daylight. General Chesnut drove off with the President's aides, and Mr. Davis sat out on our piazza. There was nobody with him but myself. Some little boys strolling by called out, "Come here and look. There is a man on Mrs. Chesnut's porch who looks just like Jeff Davis on postage stamps." People began to gather at once on the street. Mr. Davis then went in. Mrs. McCord sent a magnificent bouquet. I thought, of course, for the President, but she gave me such a scolding afterward. She did not know he was there. I, in my mistake about the bouquet, thought she knew, and so did not send her word. The President was watching me prepare a mint julep for Custis Lee when Colonel McLean came to inform us that a great crowd had gathered and that they were coming to ask the President to speak to them at 1 o'clock. An immense crowd it was, men, women, and children. The crowd overflowed the house; the President's hand was nearly shaken off. I went to the rear, my head intent on the dinner to be prepared for him, with only a Confederate commissariat. But the patriotic public had come to the rescue. I had been gathering what I could of eatables for a month, and now I found that nearly everybody in Columbia was sending me whatever they had that they thought nice enough for the President's dinner. We had the 60-year-old Madeira from Mulberry, and the beautiful old china, etc. Mrs. Preston sent a boned turkey stuffed with truffles, stuffed tomatoes, and stuffed peppers. Each made a dish as pretty as it was appetizing. A mob of small boys only came to pay their respects to the President. He seemed to know how to meet that odd delegation. Then the President's party had to go, and we bade them an affectionate farewell. Custis Lee and I had spent much time gossiping on the back porch. While I was concocting dainties for the dessert, he sat on the banister with his cigar in his mouth. He spoke very candidly, telling me many a hard truth for the Confederacy, and about the bad time which was at hand. October 18th. 10 pleasant days I owe to my sister. Kate has descended upon me unexpectedly from the mountains of Flat Rock. We are true sisters. She understands me without words, and she is the cleverest, sweetest woman I know, so graceful and gracious in manner, so good and unselfish in character, but best of all, she is so agreeable. Any time or place would be charming with Kate for a companion. General Chesnut was in Camden, but I could not wait. I gave the beautiful bride, Mrs. Darby, a dinner, which was simply perfection. I was satisfied for once in my life with my own table, and I know pleasanter guests were never seated around any table whatsoever. My house is always crowded. After all, what a number of pleasant people we have been thrown in with by war's catastrophes. I call such society glorious. It is the wind up, but the old life, as it begins to die, will die royally. General Chesnut came back disheartened. He complains that such a life as I lead gives him no time to think. October 28th. Burton Harrison writes to General Preston that supreme anxiety reigns in Richmond. Oh, for one single port! If the Alabama had had in the whole wide world a port to take her prizes to and where she could be refitted, I believe she would have borne us through. Oh, for one single port by which we could get at the outside world and refit our whole Confederacy! If we could have hired regiments from Europe, or even have imported ammunition and food for our soldiers. Some days must be dark and dreary. At the mantua maker's, however, I saw an instance of faith in our future, a bride's paraphernalia, and the radiant bride herself, the bridegroom expectant and elect now within 20 miles of Chattanooga and outward bound to face the foe. Saw at the Lawrences not only Lizzie Hamilton, a perfect little beauty, but the very table the first Declaration of Independence was written upon. These Lawrences are grandchildren of Henry Lawrence of the first Revolution. Alas, we have yet to make good our second Declaration of Independence, Southern independence, from Yankee meddling and Yankee rule. Hood has written to ask them to send General Chesnut out to command one of his brigades. In whose place? If Albert Sidney Johnston had lived. Poor old General Lee has no backing. Stonewall would have saved us from Antietam. Sherman will now catch General Lee by the rear, while Grant holds him by the head, and while Hood and Thomas are performing an Indian war dance on the frontier. Hood means to cut his way to Lee. See if he doesn't. The Yanks have had a struggle for it. More than once we seem to have been too much for them. We have been so near to success it aches one to think of it. So runs the table talk. Next to our house, which Isabella calls Tilly Tudlum, since Mr. Davis's visit, is a common of green grass and very level, beyond which comes a belt of pine trees. On this open space, within 40 paces of us, a regiment of foreign deserters has camped. They have taken the oath of allegiance to our government, and are now being drilled and disciplined into form before being sent to our army. They are mostly Germans, with some Irish, however. Their close proximity keeps me miserable. Traitors once, traitors forever. Jordan has always been held responsible for all the foolish proclamations, and indeed for whatever Beauregard reported or proclaimed. Now he has left that mighty chief, and lo, here comes from Beauregard the silliest and most boastful of his military bulletins. He brags of Shiloh. That was not the way the story was told to us. A letter from Mrs. Davis, who says, "Thank you 1,000 times, my dear friend, for your more than maternal kindness to my dear child." That is what she calls her sister, Maggie Howell. As to Mr. Davis, he thinks the best ham, the best Madeira, the best coffee, the best hostess in the world rendered Columbia delightful to him when he passed through. We are in a sad and anxious state here just now. The dead come in, but the living do not go out so fast. However, we hope all things, and trust in God as the only one able to resolve the opposite state of feeling into a triumphant, happy whole. I had a surprise of an unusually gratifying nature a few days since. I found I could not keep my horses, so I sold them. The next day they were returned to me with a handsome anonymous note to the effect that they had been bought by a few friends for me. But I fear I can not feed them. Strictly between us, things look very anxious here. November 6th. Sally Hampton went to Richmond with the Rev. Mr. Martin. She arrived there on Wednesday. On Thursday her father, Wade Hampton, fought a great battle, but just did not win it a victory narrowly missed. Darkness supervened and impenetrable woods prevented that longed for consummation. Preston Hampton rode recklessly into the hottest fire. His father sent his brother, Wade, to bring him back. Wade saw him reel in the saddle and galloped up to him, General Hampton following. As young Wade reached him, Preston fell from his horse, and the one brother, stooping to raise the other, was himself shot down. Preston recognized his father, but died without speaking a word. Young Wade, though wounded, held his brother's head up. Tom Taylor and others hurried up. The General took his dead son in his arms, kissed him, and handed his body to Tom Taylor and his friends, bade them take care of Wade, and then rode back to his post. At the head of his troops in the thickest of the fray, he directed the fight for the rest of the day. Until night he did not know young Wade's fate; that boy might be dead, too. Now, he says, no son of his must be in his command. When Wade recovers, he must join some other division. The agony of such a day, and the anxiety and the duties of the battle field, it is all more than a mere man can bear. Another letter from Mrs. Davis. She says, "I was dreadfully shocked at Preston Hampton's fate, his untimely fate. I know nothing more touching in history than General Hampton's situation at the supremest moment of his misery, when he sent one son to save the other, and saw both fall, and could not know for some moments whether both were not killed." $1,000 have slipped through my fingers already this week. At the commissary's I spent $500 to day for candles, sugar, and a lamp, etc. Tallow candles are bad enough, but of them there seems to be an end, too. Now we are restricted to smoky terrabene lamps. Terrabene is a preparation of turpentine. When the chimney of the lamp cracks, as crack it will, we plaster up the piece with paper, thick old letter paper, preferring the highly glazed kind. In the hunt for paper queer old letters come to light. Sherman, in Atlanta, has left Thomas to take care of Hood. Hood has 30,000 men, Thomas 40,000, and as many more to be had as he wants; he has only to ring the bell and call for them. Grant can get all that he wants, both for himself and for Thomas. All the world is open to them, while we are shut up in a bastile. We are at sea, and our boat has sprung a leak. November 17th. Although Sherman took Atlanta, he does not mean to stay there, be it heaven or hell. General Sherman had started from Chattanooga for his march across Georgia on May 6, 1864. He had won the battles of Dalton, Resaca, and New Hope Church in May, the battle of Kennesaw Mountain in June, the battles of Peachtree Creek and Atlanta in July, and had formally occupied Atlanta on September 2d. On November 16th he started his march from Atlanta to the sea and entered Savannah on December 23d. Early in 1865 he moved his army northward through the Carolinas, and on April 26th received the surrender of General Joseph E. Johnston.] Fire and the sword are for us here; that is the word. And now I must begin my Columbia life anew and alone. It will be a short shrift. Captain Ogden came to dinner on Sunday, and in the afternoon asked me to go with him to the Presbyterian Church and hear Mr. Palmer. We went, and I felt very youthful, as the country people say, like a girl and her beau. Ogden took me into a pew, and my husband sat afar off. What a sermon! The preacher stirred my blood. My very flesh crept and tingled. A red hot glow of patriotism passed through me. Such a sermon must strengthen the hearts and the hands of many people. There was more exhortation to fight and die, a la Joshua, than meek Christianity. Chapter 18, Part 2. Chapter 18, Part 3 of A Diary from Dixie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut. Chapter 18, Columbia, South Carolina, Part 3. November 25th. Sherman is thundering at Augusta's very doors. My general was on the wing, somber and full of care. The girls are merry enough; the staff, who fairly live here, know better. Cassandra, with a black shawl over her head, is chased by the gay crew from sofa to sofa, for she avoids them, being full of miserable anxiety. There is nothing but distraction and confusion. All things tend to the preparation for the departure of the troops. It rains all the time; such rains as I never saw before; incessant torrents. These men come in and out in the red mud and slush of Columbia streets. Things seem dismal and wretched to me to the last degree, but the staff, the girls, and the youngsters do not see it. Mrs. S., born in Connecticut, came, and she was radiant. She did not come to see me, but my nieces. She says exultingly that "Sherman will open a way out at last, and I will go at once to Europe, or go North to my relatives there." How she derided our misery and mocked when our fear cometh! I dare say she takes me for a fool. I sat there dumb, although she was in my own house. I have heard of a woman so enraged that she struck some one over the head with a shovel. To day, for the first time in my life, I know how that mad woman felt. I could have given Mrs. S. the benefit of shovel and tongs both. That splendid fellow, Preston Hampton. Home they brought their warrior, dead. And wrapped in that very Legion flag he had borne so often in battle with his own hands. A letter from Mrs. Davis to day, under date of Richmond, Virginia, November 20, 1864. She says: "Affairs West are looking so critical now that before you receive this you and I will be in the depths or else triumphant. I confess I do not sniff success in every passing breeze, but I am so tired, hoping, fearing, and being disappointed, that I have made up my mind not to be disconsolate, even though thieves break through and steal. Some people expect another attack upon Richmond shortly, but I think the avalanche will not slide until the spring breaks up its winter quarters. I have a blind kind of prognostics of victory for us, but somehow I am not cheered. The temper of Congress is less vicious, but more concerted in its hostile action." Mrs. Davis is a woman that my heart aches for in the troubles ahead. My journal, a quire of Confederate paper, lies wide open on my desk in the corner of my drawing room. Everybody reads it who chooses. Buck comes regularly to see what I have written last, and makes faces when it does not suit her. Isabella still calls me Cassandra, and puts her hands to her ears when I begin to wail. Well, Cassandra only records what she hears; she does not vouch for it. For really, one nowadays never feels certain of anything. November 28th. We dined at Mrs. McCord's. She is as strong a cordial for broken spirits and failing heart as one could wish. How her strength contrasts with our weakness! Like Dr. Palmer, she strings one up to bear bravely the worst. She has the intellect of a man and the perseverance and endurance of a woman. We have lost nearly all of our men, and we have no money, and it looks as if we had taught the Yankees how to fight since Manassas. Our best and bravest are under the sod; we shall have to wait till another generation grows up. Here we stand, despair in our hearts. "Oh, Cassandra, don't!" shouts Isabella. With our houses burning, or about to be, over our heads. The North have just got things shipshape, a splendid army, perfectly disciplined, with new levies coming in day and night. Their gentry do not go into the ranks. They hardly know there is a war up there. December 1st. At Coosawhatchie, Yankees are landing in great force. Our troops down there are raw militia, old men and boys never under fire before, some college cadets, in all a mere handful. The cradle and the grave have been robbed by us, they say. Sherman goes to Savannah and not to Augusta. December 2d. Isabella and I put on bonnets and shawls and went deliberately out for news. We determined to seek until we found. Met a man who was so ugly I could not forget him or his sobriquet. He was awfully in love with me once. He did not know me, but blushed hotly when Isabella told him who I was. He had forgotten me, I hope, or else I am changed by age and care past all recognition. He gave us the encouraging information that Grahamville had been burned to the ground. When the call for horses was made, Mrs. McCord sent in her fine bays. She comes now with a pair of mules, and looks too long and significantly at my ponies. If I were not so much afraid of her, I would hint that those mules would be of far more use in camp than my ponies. But they will seize the ponies, no doubt. In all my life before, the stables were far off from the house, and I had nothing to do with them. Now my ponies are kept under an open shed next to the back piazza. Here I sit with my work, or my desk, or my book, basking in our Southern sun, and I watch Nat feed, curry, and rub down the horses, and then he cleans their stables as thoroughly as Smith does my drawing room. I see their beds of straw comfortably laid. Nat says, "Oh, Missis, ain't ladies' business to look so much into stables." I care nothing for his grumbling, and I have never had horses in better condition. Poor ponies, you deserve every attention, and enough to eat. Grass does not grow under your feet. By night and day you are on the trot. To day General Chesnut was in Charleston on his way from Augusta to Savannah by rail. The telegraph is still working between Charleston and Savannah. Grahamville certainly is burned. There was fighting down there to day. I came home with enough to think about, Heaven knows. And then all day long we compounded a pound cake in honor of Mrs. Cuthbert, who has things so nice at home. The cake was a success, but was it worth all that trouble? As my party were driving off to the concert, an omnibus rattled up. Enter Captain Leland, of General Chesnut's staff, of as imposing a presence as a field marshal, handsome and gray haired. He was here on some military errand and brought me a letter. He said the Yankees had been repulsed, and that down in those swamps we could give a good account of ourselves if our government would send men enough. With a sufficient army to meet them down there, they could be annihilated. "Where are the men to come from?" asked Mamie wildly. "General Hood has gone off to Tennessee. Even if he does defeat Thomas there, what difference would that make here?" December 3d. We drank tea at Mrs. McCord's. She had her troubles, too. The night before, a country cousin claimed her hospitality, one who fain would take the train at 5 this morning. A little after midnight Mrs. McCord was startled out of her first sleep by loud ringing of bells. An alarm at night may mean so much just now. In an instant she was on her feet. She found her guest, who thought it was daylight and wanted to go. Mrs. McCord forcibly demonstrated how foolish it was to get up 5 hours too soon. Mrs. McCord, once more in her own warm bed, had fallen happily to sleep. She was waked by feeling 2 ice-cold hands pass cautiously over her face and person. It was pitch dark. Even Mrs. McCord gave a scream in her fright. She found it was only the irrepressible guest up and at her again. So, though it was only 3 o'clock, in order to quiet this perturbed spirit, she rose, and at 5 drove her to the station, where she had to wait some hours. But Mrs. McCord said, "Anything for peace at home." The restless people who will not let others rest. December 5th. Miss Olivia Middleton and Mr. Frederick Blake are to be married. We Confederates have invented the sit up all night for the wedding night. Isabella calls it the wake, not the wedding, of the parties married. The ceremony will be performed early in the evening. The whole company will then sit up until 5 o'clock, at which hour the bridal couple take the train for Combahee. Hope Sherman will not be so inconsiderate as to cut short the honeymoon. In tripped Brewster with his hat on his head, both hands extended, and his greeting, "Well, here we are." He was travel stained, disheveled, grimy with dirt. The prophet would have to send him many times to bathe in Jordan before he could be pronounced clean. Hood will not turn and pursue Sherman. Thomas is at his heels with 40,000 men, and can have as many more as he wants for the asking. Between Thomas and Sherman, Hood would be crushed. So he was pushing, I do not remember where or what. I know there was no comfort in anything he said. Serena's account of money spent: paper and envelopes, $12; tickets to concert, $10; toothbrush, $10; total, $32. December 14th. And now the young ones are in bed, and I am wide awake. It is an odd thing, in all my life how many persons have I seen in love? Not a half dozen. And I am a tolerably close observer; a faithful watcher have I been from my youth upward of men and manners. Society has been for me only an enlarged field for character study. Flirtation is the business of society, that is, playing at love making. It begins in vanity, it ends in vanity. It is spurred on by idleness and a want of any other excitement. Flattery, battledore and shuttlecock, how in this game flattery is dashed backward and forward. It is so soothing to self-conceit. If it begins and ends in vanity, vexation of spirit supervenes sometimes. They do occasionally burn their fingers awfully, playing with fire, but there are no hearts broken. Each party in a flirtation has secured a sympathetic listener to whom he or she can talk of himself or herself, somebody who, for the time, admires one exclusively, and, as the French say, excessivement. It is a pleasant but very foolish game, and so to bed. Hood and Thomas have had a fearful fight, with carnage and loss of generals excessive in proportion to numbers. That means they were leading and urging their men up to the enemy. I know how Bartow and Barnard Bee were killed bringing up their men. One of Mr. Chesnut's sins thrown in his teeth by the Legislature of South Carolina was that he procured the promotion of Gist, States' Rights Gist, by his influence in Richmond. What have these comfortable, stay-at-home patriots to say of General Gist now? And how could man die better than facing fearful odds, etc. So Fort McAllister has fallen. Good by Savannah. Our governor announces himself a follower of Joe Brown, of Georgia. Another famous Joe. December 19th. The deep waters are closing over us, and we are in this house like the outsiders at the time of the flood. We care for none of these things. We eat, drink, laugh, dance, in lightness of heart. Dr. Trezevant came to tell me the dismal news. How he piled on the agony! Desolation, mismanagement, despair. General Young, with the flower of Hampton's cavalry, is in Columbia. Horses can not be found to mount them. Neither the Governor of Georgia nor the Governor of South Carolina is moving hand or foot. They have given up. The Yankees claim another victory for Thomas. Reference is here made to the battle between Hood and Thomas at Nashville, the result of which was the breaking up of Hood's army as a fighting force. Hope it may prove like most of their victories, brag and bluster. Can't say why, maybe I am benumbed, but I do not feel so intensely miserable. December 27th. Oh, why did we go to Camden? The very dismalest Christmas overtook us there. Miss Rhett went with us, a brilliant woman and very agreeable. "The world, you know, is composed," said she, "of men, women, and Rhetts." See Lady Montagu. Now we feel that if we are to lose our negroes, we would as soon see Sherman free them as the Confederate government. Freeing negroes is the last Confederate government craze. We are a little too slow about it, that is all. Sold 15 bales of cotton and took a sad farewell look at Mulberry. It is a magnificent old country seat, with old oaks, green lawns, and all. So I took that last farewell of Mulberry, once so hated, now so beloved. January 7th. Sherman is at Hardeeville and Hood in Tennessee, the last of his men not gone, as Louis Wigfall so cheerfully prophesied. Serena went for a half hour to day to the dentist. Her teeth are of the whitest and most regular, simply perfection. She fancied it was better to have a dentist look in her mouth before returning to the mountains. For that look she paid $350 in Confederate money. "Why, has this money any value at all?" she asked. Little enough, in all truth, sad to say. Brewster was here and stayed till midnight. Said he must see General Chesnut. He had business with him. His "Me and General Hood" is no longer comic. He described Sherman's march of destruction and desolation. "Sherman leaves a track 50 miles wide upon which there is no living thing to be seen," said Brewster before he departed. January 10th. You do the Anabasis business when you want to get out of the enemy's country, and the Thermopylae business when they want to get into your country. But we retreated in our own country, and we gave up our mountain passes without a blow. But never mind the Greeks. If we had only our own gamecock Sumter, our own swamp fox Marion. Marion's men or Sumter's, or the equivalent of them, now lie under the sod in Virginia or Tennessee. January 14th. Yesterday I broke down, gave way to abject terror under the news of Sherman's advance, with no news of my husband. To day, while wrapped up on the sofa, too dismal even for moaning, there was a loud knock. Shawls on and all, just as I was, I rushed to the door to find a telegram from my husband. All well, be at home Tuesday. It was dated from Adam's Run. I felt as light-hearted as if the war were over. Then I looked at the date and the place. Adam's Run. It ends as it began, in a run. Bull's Run, from which their first sprightly running astounded the world, and now Adam's Run. But if we must run, who are left to run? From Bull Run they ran full-handed, but we have fought until maimed soldiers, women, and children are all that remain to run. To day Kershaw's brigade, or what is left of it, passed through. What shouts greeted it, and what bold shouts of thanks it returned! It was all a very encouraging noise, absolutely comforting. Some true men are left, after all. January 16th. My husband is at home once more; for how long I do not know. His aides fill the house, and a group of hopelessly wounded haunt the place. The drilling and the marching go on outside. It rains a flood, with freshet after freshet. The forces of nature are befriending us, for our enemies have to make their way through swamps. A month ago my husband wrote me a letter which I promptly suppressed after showing it to Mrs. McCord. He warned us to make ready, for the end had come. Our resources were exhausted, and the means of resistance could not be found. We could not bring ourselves to believe it, and now, he thinks, with the railroad all blown up, the swamps made impassable by the freshets, which have no time to subside, so constant is the rain, and the negroes utterly apathetic, would they be so if they saw us triumphant? If we had but an army to seize the opportunity, we might do something, but there are no troops; that is the real trouble. To day Mrs. McCord exchanged $16,000 in Confederate bills for $300 in gold. 16,000 for 300. January 17th. The bazaar for the benefit of the hospitals opens now. Sherman marches constantly. All the railroads are smashed, and if I laugh at any mortal thing, it is that I may not weep. Generals are as plenty as blackberries, but none are in command. The Peace Commissioner, Blair, came. They say he gave Mr. Davis the kiss of peace. And we send Stephens, Campbell, all who have believed in this thing, to negotiate for peace. No hope, no good. Who dares hope? Repressed excitement in church. A great railroad character was called out. He soon returned and whispered something to Joe Johnston, and they went out together. Somehow the whisper moved around to us that Sherman was at Branchville. "Grant us patience, good Lord," was prayed aloud. "Not Ulysses Grant, good Lord," murmured Teddy, profanely. Hood came yesterday. He is staying at the Prestons' with Jack. They sent for us. What a heartfelt greeting he gave us. He can stand well enough without his crutch, but he does very slow walking. How plainly he spoke out dreadful words about "my defeat and discomfiture, my army destroyed, my losses," etc., etc. He said he had nobody to blame but himself. A telegram from Beauregard to day to my husband. He does not know whether Sherman intends to advance on Branchville, Charleston, or Columbia. Isabella said, "Maybe you attempted the impossible," and began one of her merriest stories. Jack Preston touched me on the arm, and we slipped out. "He did not hear a word she was saying. He has forgotten us all. Did you notice how he stared in the fire, and the lurid spots which came out on his face, and the drops of perspiration that stood on his forehead?" "Yes. He is going over some bitter scene. He sees Willie Preston with his heart shot away. He sees the panic at Nashville and the dead on the battlefield at Franklin." "That agony on his face comes again and again," said tender hearted Jack. "I can't keep him out of those absent fits." Governor Magrath and General Winder talk of preparations for a defense of Columbia. If Beauregard can't stop Sherman down there, what have we got here to do it with? Can we check or impede his march? Can any one? Last night General Hampton came in. I am sure he would do something to save us if he were put in supreme command here. Hampton says Joe Johnston is equal, if not superior, to Lee as a commanding officer. My silver is in a box and has been delivered for safe keeping to Isaac McLaughlin, who is really my beau ideal of a grateful negro. I mean to trust him. My husband cares for none of these things now and lets me do as I please. Tom Archer died almost as soon as he got to Richmond. Prison takes the life out of men. He was only half alive when here. He had a strange, pallid look and such a vacant stare until you roused him. Poor pretty Sally Archer, that is the end of you. Footnote: Under last date entry, January 17th, the author chronicles events of later occurrence. It was her not infrequent custom to jot down happenings in dateless lines or paragraphs. Mr. Blair visited President Davis January 12th. Stevens, Hunter, and Campbell were appointed peace commissioners January 28th. End footnote. End of chapter 18, part 3. Chapter 19, Part 1 of A Diary from Dixie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut. Chapter 19, Lincolnton, North Carolina, February 16, 1865, to March 15, 1865. Part 1. Lincolnton, North Carolina, February 16, 1865. A change has come o'er the spirit of my dream. Dear old choir of yellow, coarse, Confederate homemade paper, here you are again. An age of anxiety and suffering has passed over my head since last I wrote and wept over your forlorn pages. My ideas of those last days are confused. The Martins left Columbia the Friday before I did, and Mammy, the negro woman who had nursed them, refused to go with them. That daunted me. Then Mrs. McCord, who was to send her girls with me, changed her mind. She sent them upstairs in her house and actually took away the staircase. That was her plan. Then I met Mr. Christopher Hampton arranging to take off his sisters. They were flitting, but were to go only as far as Yorkville. He said it was time to move on. Sherman was at Orangeburg, barely a day's journey from Columbia, and had left a track as bare and blackened as a fire leaves on the prairies. So my time had come, too. My husband urged me to go home. He said Camden would be safe enough. They had no spite against that old town, as they have against Charleston and Columbia. Molly, weeping and wailing, came in while we were at table. Wiping her red-hot face with the cook's grimy apron, she said I ought to go among our own black people on the plantation. They would take care of me better than any one else. So I agreed to go to Mulberry or the Hermitage plantation, and sent Lawrence down with a wagon load of my valuables. Then a Miss Patterson called, a refugee from Tennessee. She had been in a country overrun by Yankee invaders, and she described so graphically all the horrors to be endured by those subjected to fire and sword, rapine and plunder, that I was fairly scared, and determined to come here. This is a thoroughly out of all roots place. And yet I can go to Charlotte, am halfway to Kate at Flat Rock, and there is no Federal army between me and Richmond. As soon as my mind was finally made up, we telegraphed to Lawrence, who had barely got to Camden in the wagon when the telegram was handed to him, so he took the train and came back. Mr. Chesnut sent him with us to take care of the party. We thought that if the negroes were ever so loyal to us, they could not protect me from an army bent upon sweeping us from the face of the earth, and if they tried to do so, so much the worse would it be for the poor things with their Yankee friends. I then left them to shift for themselves, as they are accustomed to do, and I took the same liberty. My husband does not care a fig for the property question, and never did. Perhaps if he had ever known poverty it would be different. He talked beautifully about it, as he always does about everything. I have told him often that if at Heaven's gate St. Peter would listen to him a while and let him tell his own story, he would get in, and the angels might give him a crown extra. Now he says he has only one care, that I should be safe, and not so harassed with dread. And then there is his blind old father. "A man," said he, "can always die like a patriot and a gentleman, with no fuss, and take it coolly. It is hard not to envy those who are out of all this, their difficulties ended, those who have met death gloriously on the battlefield, their doubts all solved. One can but do his best, and leave the result to a higher power." After New Orleans, those vain, passionate, impatient little Creoles were forever committing suicide, driven to it by despair and Beast Butler. As we read these things, Mrs. Davis said, "If they want to die, why not first kill Beast Butler, rid the world of their foe, and be saved the trouble of murdering themselves?" That practical way of removing their intolerable burden did not occur to them. I repeated this suggestive anecdote to our corps of generals without troops here in the house, as they spread out their maps on my table where lay this quire of paper from which I write. Every man jack of them had a safe plan to stop Sherman, if. Even Beauregard and Lee were expected, but Grant had double teamed on Lee. Lee could not save his own; how could he come to save us? Read the list of the dead in those last battles around Richmond and Petersburg if you want to break your heart. Battles at Hatchin's Run, in Virginia, had been fought on February 5, 6, and 7, 1865. I took French leave of Columbia, slipped away without a word to anybody. Isaac Hayne and Mr. Chesnut came down to the Charlotte depot with me. Ellen, my maid, left her husband and only child, but she was willing to come, and, indeed, was very cheerful in her way of looking at it. "I want to travel round with Missis some time, 'stead of Molly going all de time." A woman 50 years old at least, and uglier than she was old, sharply rebuked my husband for standing at the car window for a last few words with me. She said rudely, "Stand aside, sir, I want air." With his hat off and his grand air, my husband bowed politely and said, "In one moment, madam, I have something important to say to my wife." She talked aloud and introduced herself to every man, claiming his protection. She had never traveled alone before in all her life. Old age and ugliness are protective in some cases. She was ardently patriotic for a while. Then she was joined by her friend, a man as crazy as herself to get out of this. From their talk I gleaned she had been for years in the Treasury Department. They were about to cross the lines. The whole idea was to get away from the trouble to come down here. They were Yankees, but were they not spies? Here I am, broken hearted and an exile. And in such a place! We have bare floors, and for a feather bed, pine table, and 2 chairs I pay $30 a day. Such sheets! But fortunately I have some of my own. At the door, before I was well out of the hack, the woman of the house packed Lawrence back, neck and heels; she would not have him at any price. She treated him as Mr. F.'s aunt did Clinman in Little Dorrit. She said his clothes were too fine for a nigger. His airs, indeed! Poor Lawrence was humble and silent. He said at last, "Miss Mary, send me back to Mars Jeems." I began to look for a pencil to write a note to my husband, but in the flurry could not find one. "Here is one," said Lawrence, producing one with a gold case. "Go away," she shouted. "I want no niggers here with gold pencils and airs." So Lawrence fled before the storm, but not before he had begged me to go back. He said, "If Mars Jeems knew how you was treated, he'd never be willing for you to stay here." The Martins had seen my, to them, well known traveling case as the hack trotted up Main Street, and they arrived at this juncture out of breath. We embraced and wept. I kept my room. The Fants are refugees here, too. They are Virginians, and have been in exile since the second battle of Manassas. Poor things, they seem to have been everywhere and seen and suffered everything. They even tried to go back to their own house, but found one chimney only standing alone. Even that had been taken possession of by a Yankee, who had written his name upon it. The day I left home I had packed a box of flour, sugar, rice, and coffee, but my husband would not let me bring it. He said I was coming to a land of plenty, unexplored North Carolina, where the foot of the Yankee marauder was unknown, and in Columbia they would need food. Now I have written for that box and many other things to be sent me by Lawrence, or I shall starve. The Middletons have come. How joyously I sprang to my feet to greet them. Mrs. Ben Rutledge described the hubbub in Columbia. Everybody was flying in every direction like a flock of swallows. She heard the enemy's guns booming in the distance. The train no longer runs from Charlotte to Columbia. Miss Middleton possesses her soul in peace. She is as cool, clever, rational, and entertaining as ever, and we talked for hours. Mrs. Reed was in a state of despair. I can well understand that sinking of mind and body during the first days as the abject misery of it all closes in upon you. I remember my suicidal tendencies when I first came here. February 18th. Here I am, thank God, settled at the McLeans', in a clean, comfortable room, airy and cozy. With a grateful heart I stir up my own bright wood fire. My bill for 4 days at this splendid hotel here was $240, with $25 additional for fire. But once more my lines have fallen in pleasant places. As we came up on the train from Charlotte, a soldier took out of his pocket a filthy rag. If it had lain in the gutter for months it could not have looked worse. He unwrapped the thing carefully and took out 2 biscuits of the species known as hardtack. Then he gallantly handed me one, and with an ingratiating smile asked me to take some. Then he explained, saying, "Please take these 2, swap with me. Give me something softer that I can eat. I am very weak still." Immediately, for his benefit, my basket of luncheon was emptied, but as for his biscuit, I would not choose any. Isabella asked, "But what did you say to him when he poked them under your nose?" And I replied, "I held up both hands, saying, 'I would not take from you anything that is yours; far from it. I would not touch them for worlds.'" A tremendous day's work, and I helped with a will. Our window glass was all to be washed. Then the brass andirons were to be polished. After we rubbed them bright, how pretty they were. Presently Ellen would have none of me. She was scrubbing the floor. "You go, dat's a good missus, and stay to Miss Isabella's till de floor dry." I am very docile now, and I obeyed orders. February 19th. The Fants say all the trouble at the hotel came from our servants bragging. They represented us as millionaires, and the Middleton men servants smoked cigars. Mrs. Reed's averred that he had never done anything in his life but stand behind his master at table with a silver waiter in his hand. We were charged accordingly, but perhaps the landlady did not get the best of us after all, for we paid her in Confederate money. Now that they won't take Confederate money in the shops here, how are we to live? Miss Middleton says quartermasters' families are all clad in good gray cloth, but the soldiers go naked. Well, we are like the families of whom the novels always say they are poor but honest. Poor? Well nigh beggars are we, for I do not know where my next meal is to come from. Called on Mrs. Ben Rutledge to day. She is lovely, exquisitely refined. Her mother, Mrs. Middleton, came in. "You are not looking well, dear. Anything the matter?" "No, but, mamma, I have not eaten a mouthful to day. The children can eat mush; I can't. I drank my tea, however." She does not understand taking favors, and, blushing violently, refused to let me have Ellen make her some biscuit. I went home and sent her some biscuit, all the same. February 22d. Isabella has been reading my diaries. How we laugh because my sage divinations all come to naught. My famous insight into character is utter folly. The diaries were lying on the hearth ready to be burned, but she told me to hold on to them, think of them a while, and don't be rash. Afterward, when Isabella and I were taking a walk, General Joseph E. Johnston joined us. He explained to us all of Lee's and Stonewall Jackson's mistakes. We had nothing to say. How could we say anything? He said he was very angry when he was ordered to take command again. He might well have been in a genuine rage. This on and off procedure would be enough to bewilder the coolest head. Mrs. Johnston knows how to be a partisan of Joe Johnston and still not make his enemies uncomfortable. She can be pleasant and agreeable, as she was to my face. A letter from my husband, who is at Charlotte. He came near being taken a prisoner in Columbia, for he was asleep the morning of the 17th when the Yankees blew up the railroad depot. That woke him, of course, and he found everybody had left Columbia, and the town was surrendered by the mayor, Colonel Goodwin. Hampton and his command had been gone several hours. Isaac Hayne came away with General Chesnut. There was no fire in the town when they left. They overtook Hampton's command at Meek's Mill. That night, from the hills where they encamped, they saw the fire, and knew the Yankees were burning the town, as we had every reason to expect they would. Molly was left in charge of everything of mine, including Mrs. Preston's cow, which I was keeping, and Sally Goodwin's furniture. Charleston and Wilmington have surrendered. I have no further use for a newspaper. I never want to see another one as long as I live. Wade Hampton has been made a lieutenant general, too late. If he had been made one and given command in South Carolina 6 months ago, I believe he would have saved us. Shame, disgrace, beggary, all have come at once and are hard to bear, the grand smash. Rain, rain outside, and naught but drowning floods of tears inside. I could not bear it, so I rushed down in that rainstorm to the Martins. Reverend Mr. Martin met me at the door. "Madam," said he, "Columbia is burned to the ground." I bowed my head and sobbed aloud. "Stop that," he said, trying to speak cheerfully. "Come here, wife," said he to Mrs. Martin. "This woman cries with her whole heart, just as she laughs." But in spite of his words, his voice broke down, and he was hardly calmer than myself. February 23d. I want to get to Kate. I am so utterly heartbroken. I hope John Chesnut and General Chesnut may at least get into the same army. We seem scattered over the face of the earth. Isabella sits there calmly reading. I have quieted down after the day's rampage. May our Heavenly Father look down on us and have pity. They say I was the last refugee from Columbia who was allowed to enter by the door of the cars. The government took possession then, and women could only be smuggled in by the windows. Stout ones stuck and had to be pushed, pulled, and hauled in by main force. Dear Mrs. Izard, with all her dignity, was subjected to this rough treatment. She was found almost too much for the size of the car windows. February 25th. The Pfeiffers, who live opposite us here, are descendants of those Pfeiffers who came South with Mr. Chesnut's ancestors after the Fort Duquesne disaster. They have now, therefore, been driven out of their Eden, the Valley of Virginia, a second time. The present Pfeiffer is the great man, the rich man par excellence of Lincolnton. They say that with something very near to tears in his eyes he heard of our latest defeats. "It is only a question of time with us now," he said. "The raiders will come, you know." In Washington, before I knew any of them except by sight, Mrs. Davis, Mrs. Emory, and Mrs. Johnston were always together, inseparable friends, and the trio were pointed out to me as the cleverest women in the United States. Now that I do know them all well, I think the world was right in its estimate of them. Met a Mr. Ancrum of serenely cheerful aspect, happy and hopeful. "All right now," said he. "Sherman sure to be thrashed. Joe Johnston is in command." Dr. Darby says, when the oft mentioned Joseph, the malcontent, gave up his command to Hood, he remarked with a smile, "I hope you will be able to stop Sherman. It was more than I could do." General Johnston is not of Mr. Ancrum's way of thinking as to his own powers, for he stayed here several days after he was ordered to the front. He must have known he could do no good, and I am of his opinion. When the wagon in which I was to travel to Flat Rock drove up to the door, covered with a tent like white cloth, in my embarrassment for an opening in the conversation, I asked the driver's name. He showed great hesitation in giving it, but at last said, "My name is Sherman," adding, "and now I see by your face that you won't go with me. My name is against me these times." Here he grinned and remarked, "But you would leave Lincolnton." That name was the last drop in my cup, but I gave him Mrs. Glover's reason for staying here. General Johnston had told her this might be the safest place after all. He thinks the Yankees are making straight for Richmond and General Lee's rear, and will go by Camden and Lancaster, leaving Lincolnton on their west flank. The McLeans are kind people. They ask no rent for their rooms, only $20 a week for firewood. $20! And such dollars! Mere waste paper. Mrs. Munroe took up my photograph book, in which I have a picture of all the Yankee generals. "I want to see the men who are to be our masters," said she. "Not mine," I answered. "Thank God, come what may. This was a free fight. We had as much right to fight to get out as they had to fight to keep us in. If they try to play the masters, anywhere upon the habitable globe will I go, never to see a Yankee, and if I die on the way, so much the better." Then I sat down and wrote to my husband in language much worse than anything I can put in this book. As I wrote, I was blinded by tears of rage. Indeed, I nearly wept myself away. February 26th. Mrs. Munroe offered me religious books, which I declined, being already provided with the Lamentations of Jeremiah, the Psalms of David, the denunciations of Hosea, and, above all, the patient wail of Job. Job is my comforter now. I should be so thankful to know life would never be any worse with me. My husband is well and has been ordered to join the Great Retreater. I am bodily comfortable, if somewhat dingily lodged, and I daily part with my raiment for food. We find no one who will exchange eatables for Confederate money, so we are devouring our clothes. Opportunities for social enjoyment are not wanting. Miss Middleton and Isabella often drink a cup of tea with me. One might search the whole world and not find two cleverer or more agreeable women. Miss Middleton is brilliant and accomplished. She must have been a hard student all her life. She knows everybody worth knowing, and she has been everywhere. Then she is so high bred, high hearted, pure, and true. She is so clean minded. She could not harbor a wrong thought. She is utterly unselfish, a devoted daughter and sister. She is one among the many large-brained women a kind Providence has thrown in my way, such as Mrs. McCord, daughter of Judge Cheves, Mary Preston Darby, Mrs. Emory, granddaughter of old Franklin, the American wise man, and Mrs. Jefferson Davis. How I love to praise my friends. As a ray of artificial sunshine, Mrs. Munroe sent me an Examiner. Daniel thinks we are at the last gasp, and now England and France are bound to step in. England must know if the United States of America are triumphant, they will tackle her next, and France must wonder if she will not have to give up Mexico. My faith fails me. It is all too late. No help for us now from God or man. Thomas, Daniel says, was now to ravage Georgia, but Sherman, from all accounts, has done that work once for all. There will be no aftermath. They say no living thing is found in Sherman's track, only chimneys, like telegraph poles, to carry the news of Sherman's army backward. In all that tropical downpour, Mrs. Munroe sent me overshoes and an umbrella, with the message, "Come over." I went, for it would be as well to drown in the streets as to hang myself at home to my own bedpost. At Mrs. Munroe's I met a Miss McDaniel. Her father, for 7 years, was the Methodist preacher at our negro church. The negro church is in a grove just opposite Mulberry House. She says her father has so often described that fine old establishment and its beautiful lawn, live oaks, etc. Now, I dare say, there stand at Mulberry only Sherman's sentinels, stacks of chimneys. We have made up our minds for the worst. Mulberry House is no doubt razed to the ground. Miss McDaniel was inclined to praise us. She said: "As a general rule, the Episcopal minister went to the family mansion, and the Methodist missionary preached to the negroes and dined with the overseer at his house; but at Mulberry her father always stayed at the house, and the family were so kind and attentive to him." It was rather pleasant to hear one's family so spoken of among strangers. So, well equipped to brave the weather, armed cap a pie, so to speak, I continued my prowl farther afield and brought up at the Middletons. I may have surprised them, for, at such an inclement season, they hardly expected a visitor. Never, however, did lonely old woman receive such a warm and hearty welcome. Now we know the worst. Are we growing hardened? We avoid all allusion to Columbia. We never speak of home, and we begin to deride the certain poverty that lies ahead. How it pours! Could I live many days in solitary confinement? Things are beginning to be unbearable, but I must sit down and be satisfied. My husband is safe so far. Let me be thankful it is no worse with me. But there is the gnawing pain all the same. What is the good of being here at all? Our world has simply gone to destruction. And across the way the fair Lydia languishes. She has not even my resources against ennui. She has no Isabella, no Miss Middleton, two as brilliant women as any in Christendom. Oh, how does she stand it? I mean to go to church if it rains cats and dogs. My feet are wet 2 or 3 times a day. We never take cold; our hearts are too hot within us for that. A carriage was driven up to the door as I was writing. I began to tie on my bonnet, and said to myself in the glass, "Oh, you lucky woman!" I was all in a tremble, so great was my haste to be out of this. Mrs. Glover had the carriage. She came for me to go and hear Mr. Martin preach. He lifts our spirits from this dull earth. He takes us up to heaven. That I will not deny. Still he can not hold my attention; my heart wanders, and my mind strays back to South Carolina. Oh, Vandal Sherman! What are you at there, hard-hearted wretch that you are? A letter from General Chesnut, who writes from camp near Charlotte under date of February 28th. I thank you 1,000,000 times for your kind letters. They are now my only earthly comfort, except the hope that all is not yet lost. We have been driven like a wild herd from our country. And it is not from a want of spirit in the people or soldiers, nor from want of energy and competency in our commanders. The restoration of Joe Johnston, it is hoped, will redound to the advantage of our cause and the reestablishment of our fortunes. I am still in not very agreeable circumstances; for the last 4 days completely waterbound. I am informed that a detachment of Yankees were sent from Liberty Hill to Camden with a view to destroying all the houses, mills, and provisions about that place. No particulars have reached me. You know I expected the worst that could be done, and am fully prepared for any report which may be made. It would be a happiness beyond expression to see you even for an hour. I have heard nothing from my poor old father. I fear I shall never see him again. Such is the fate of war. I do not complain. I have deliberately chosen my lot, and am prepared for any fate that awaits me. My care is for you, and I trust still in the good cause of my country and the justice and mercy of God. It was a lively, rushing, young set that South Carolina put to the fore. They knew it was a time of imminent danger, and that the fight would be 10 to 1. They expected to win by activity, energy, and enthusiasm. Then came the wet blanket, the croakers. Now these are posing, wrapping Caesar's mantle about their heads to fall with dignity. Those gallant youths who dashed so gayly to the front lie mostly in bloody graves. Well for them, maybe. There are worse things than honorable graves. Wearisome thoughts. Late in life we are to begin anew and have laborious, difficult days ahead. We have contradictory testimony. Governor Aiken has passed through, saying Sherman left Columbia as he found it, and was last heard from at Cheraw. Dr. Chisholm walked home with me. He says that is the last version of the story. Now, my husband wrote that he himself saw the fires which burned up Columbia. The first night his camp was near enough to the town for that. They say Sherman has burned Lancaster. that Sherman nightmare, that ghoul, that hyena. But I do not believe it. He takes his time. There are none to molest him. He does things leisurely and deliberately. Why stop to do so needless a thing as burn Lancaster Court House, the jail, and the tavern? As I remember it, that description covers Lancaster. A raiding party, they say, did for Camden. No train from Charlotte yesterday. Rumor says Sherman is in Charlotte. End of chapter 19, part 1. Chapter 19, Part 2 of A Diary from Dixie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut. Chapter 19, Lincolnton, North Carolina, Part 2. February 29th. Trying to brave it out. They have plenty, yet let our men freeze and starve in their prisons. Would you be willing to be as wicked as they are? 1,000 times no. But we must feed our army first, if we can do so much as that. Our captives need not starve if Lincoln would consent to exchange prisoners. But men are nothing to the United States, things to throw away. If they send our men back, they strengthen our army, and so again their policy is to keep everybody and everything here in order to help starve us out. That, too, is what Sherman's destruction means, to starve us out. Young Brevard asked me to play accompaniments for him. The guitar is my instrument, or was, so I sang and played to my own great delight. It was a distraction. Then I made eggnog for the soldier boys below and came home. Have spent a very pleasant evening. Begone, dull care, you and I never agree. Ellen and I are shut up here. It is rain, rain, everlasting rain. As our money is worthless, are we not to starve? Heavens, how grateful I was to day when Mrs. McLean sent me a piece of chicken. I think the emptiness of my larder has leaked out. To day Mrs. Monroe sent me hot cakes and eggs for my breakfast. March 5th. Is the sea drying up? Is it going up into mist and coming down on us in a waterspout? The rain, it raineth every day. The weather typifies our tearful despair on a large scale. It is also Lent now, a quite convenient custom, for we, in truth, have nothing to eat. So we fast and pray and go dragging to church like drowned rats to be preached at. My letter from my husband was so, well, what in a woman you would call heartbroken, that I began to get ready for a run up to Charlotte. My hat was on my head, my traveling bag in my hand, and Ellen was saying, "Which umbrella, ma'am?" "Stop, Ellen," said I. "Someone is speaking out there." A tap came at the door, and Miss McLean threw the door wide open as she said in a triumphant voice, "Permit me to announce General Chesnut." As she went off she sang out, "Oh, does not a meeting like this make amends?" We went after luncheon to see Mrs. Monroe. My husband wanted to thank her for all her kindness to me. I was awfully proud of him. I used to think that everybody had the air and manners of a gentleman. I know now that these accomplishments are things to thank God for. Father O'Connell came in, fresh from Columbia, and with news at last. Sherman's men had burned the convent. Mrs. Monroe had pinned her faith to Sherman because he was a Roman Catholic, but Father O'Connell was there and saw it. The nuns and girls marched to the old Hampton house, Mrs. Preston's now, and so saved it. They walked between files of soldiers. Men were rolling tar barrels and lighting torches to fling on the house when the nuns came. Columbia is but dust and ashes, burned to the ground. Men, women, and children have been left there homeless, houseless, and without one particle of food, reduced to picking up corn that was left by Sherman's horses on picket grounds and parching it to stay their hunger. How kind my friends were on this, my fete day. Mrs. Rutledge sent me a plate of biscuit, Mrs. Monroe, nearly enough food supplies for an entire dinner, Mrs. McLean a cake for dessert. Ellen cooked and served up the material happily at hand very nicely indeed. There never was a more successful dinner. My heart was too full to eat, but I was quiet and calm; at least I spared my husband the trial of a broken voice and tears. As he stood at the window, with his back to the room, he said, Where are they now, my old blind father and my sister? Day and night I see her leading him out from under his own roof tree. That picture pursues me persistently. But come, let us talk of pleasanter things. To which I answered, "Where will you find them?" He took off his heavy cavalry boots, and Ellen carried them away to wash the mud off and dry them. She brought them back just as Miss Middleton walked in. In his agony, while struggling with those huge boots and trying to get them on, he spoke to her volubly in French. She turned away from him instantly as she saw his shoeless plight, and said to me, "I had not heard of your happiness. I did not know the General was here." Not until next day did we have time to remember and laugh at that outbreak of French. Miss Middleton answered him in the same language. He told her how charmed he was with my surroundings, and that he would go away with a much lighter heart since he had seen the kind people with whom he would leave me. I asked my husband what that correspondence between Sherman and Hampton meant. This while I was preparing something for our dinner. His back was still turned as he gazed out of the window. He spoke in the low and steady monotone that characterized our conversation the whole day, and yet there was something in his voice that thrilled me as he said: "The second day after our march from Columbia we passed the M's. He was a bonded man and not at home. His wife said at first that she could not find forage for our horses, but afterward she succeeded in procuring some. I noticed a very handsome girl who stood beside her as she spoke, and I suggested to her mother the propriety of sending her out of the track of both armies. Things were no longer as heretofore. There was so much straggling, so many camp followers, with no discipline, on the outskirts of the army. The girl answered quickly, 'I wish to stay with my mother.' That very night a party of Wheeler's men came to our camp, and such a tale they told of what had been done at the place, of horror and destruction the mother left raving. The outrage had been committed before her very face, she having been secured first. After this crime the fiends moved on. There were only 7 of them. They had been gone but a short time when Wheeler's men went in pursuit at full speed and overtook them, cut their throats, and wrote upon their breasts, 'These were the 7.' But the girl? Oh, she was dead. "Are his critics as violent as ever against the President?" asked I, when recovered from pity and horror. "Sometimes I think I am the only friend he has in the world. At these dinners, which they give us everywhere, I spoil the sport, for I will not sit still and hear Jeff Davis abused for things he is no more responsible for than any man at that table. Once I lost my temper and told them it sounded like arrant nonsense to me, and that Jeff Davis was a gentleman and a patriot, with more brains than the assembled company. "You lost your temper, truly," said I. And I did not know it. I thought I was as cool as I am now. In Washington, when we left, Jeff Davis ranked second to none in intellect, and maybe first from the South, and Mrs. Davis was the friend of Mrs. Emory, Mrs. Joe Johnston, and Mrs. Montgomery Blair, and others of that circle. Now they rave that he is nobody, and never was." "And she?" I asked. "Oh, you would think to hear them that he found her yesterday in a Mississippi swamp." "Well, in the French Revolution it was worse. When a man failed he was guillotined. Mirabeau did not die a day too soon, even Mirabeau." He is gone. With despair in my heart I left that railroad station. Allen Green walked home with me. I met his wife and his 4 ragged little boys a day or so ago. She is the neatest, the primmest, the softest of women. Her voice is like the gentle cooing of a dove. That lowering black future hangs there all the same. The end of the war brings no hope of peace or of security to us. Ellen said I had a little piece of bread and a little molasses in store for my dinner to day. March 6th. To day came a godsend. Even a small piece of bread and the molasses had become things of the past. My larder was empty, when a tall mulatto woman brought a tray covered by a huge white serviette. Ellen ushered her in with a flourish, saying, "Mrs. McDaniel's maid." The maid set down the tray upon my bare table and uncovered it with conscious pride. There were fowls ready for roasting, sausages, butter, bread, eggs, and preserves. I was dumb with delight. After silent thanks to heaven, my powers of speech returned, and I exhausted myself in messages of gratitude to Mrs. McDaniel. "Missis, you oughtn't to let her see how glad you was," said Ellen. "It was a lettin' of yourself down." Mrs. Glover gave me some yarn, and I bought 5 dozen eggs with it from a wagon eggs for Lent. To show that I have faith yet in humanity, I paid in advance in yarn for something to eat, which they promised to bring to morrow. Had they rated their eggs at $100 a dozen in Confederate money, I would have paid it as readily as $10. But I haggle in yarn for the millionth part of a thread. 2 weeks have passed, and the rumors from Columbia are still of the vaguest. No letter has come from there, no direct message or messenger. "My God!" cried Dr. Frank Miles, "but it is strange. Can it be anything so dreadful they dare not tell us?" Dr. San Julian Ravenel has grown pale and haggard with care. His wife and children were left there. Dr. Brumby has at last been coaxed into selling me enough leather for the making of a pair of shoes, else I should have had to give up walking. He knew my father well. He intimated that in some way my father helped him through college. His own money had not sufficed, and so William C. Preston and my father advanced funds sufficient to let him be graduated. Then my uncle, Charles Miller, married his aunt. I listened in rapture, for all this tended to leniency in the leather business, and I bore off the leather gladly. When asked for Confederate money in trade, I never stopped to bargain. I give them $20 or $50 cheerfully for anything, either sum. March 8th. Colonel Childs came with a letter from my husband and a newspaper containing a full account of Sherman's cold-blooded brutality in Columbia. Then we walked 3 miles to return the call of my benefactress, Mrs. McDaniel. They were kind and hospitable at her house, but my heart was like lead. My head ached, and my legs were worse than my head, and then I had a nervous chill. So I came home, went to bed, and stayed there until the Fants brought me a letter saying my husband would be here to day. Then I got up and made ready to give him a cheerful reception. Soon a man called, Troy by name, the same who kept the little corner shop so near my house in Columbia, and of whom we bought things so often. We had fraternized. He now shook hands with me and looked in my face pitifully. We seemed to have been friends all our lives. He says they stopped the fire at the Methodist College, perhaps to save old Mr. McCarthy's house. Mr. Sheriff Dent, being burned out, took refuge in our house. He contrived to find favor in Yankee eyes. Troy relates that a Yankee officer snatched a watch from Mrs. McCord's bosom. The soldiers tore the bundles of clothes that the poor wretches tried to save from their burning homes and dashed them back into the flames. They meant to make a clean sweep. They were howling round the fires like demons, these Yankees, in their joy and triumph at our destruction. Well, we have given them a big scare and kept them miserable for 4 years, the little handful of us. A woman we met on the street stopped to tell us a painful coincidence. A general was married, but he could not stay at home very long after the wedding. When his baby was born, they telegraphed him, and he sent back a rejoicing answer with an inquiry, "Is it a boy or a girl?" He was killed before he got the reply. Was it not sad? His poor young wife says, "He did not live to hear that his son lived." The kind woman added sorrowfully, "Died and did not know the sect of his child." "Let us hope it will be a Methodist," said Isabella, the irrepressible. At the venison feast Isabella heard a good word for me and one for General Chesnut's air of distinction, a thing people can not give themselves, try as ever they may. Lord Byron says, "Everybody knows a gentleman when he sees one, and nobody can tell what it is that makes a gentleman. He knows the thing, but he can't describe it." Now, there are some French words that can not be translated, and we all know the thing they mean, gracieuse and svelte, for instance, as applied to a woman. Not that anything was said of me like that. Far from it. I am fair, fat, 40, and jolly, and in my unbroken jollity, as far as they know, they found my charm. You see, she doesn't howl, she doesn't cry, she never, never tells anybody about what she was used to at home and what she has lost. High praise, and I intend to try and deserve it ever after. March 10th. Went to church crying to Ellen, "It is Lent, we must fast and pray." When I came home, my good fairy, Colonel Childs, had been here bringing rice and potatoes and promising flour. He is a trump. He pulled out his pocketbook and offered to be my banker. He stood there on the street, Miss Middleton and Isabella witnessing the generous action, and straight out offered me money. "No, put up that," said I. "I am not a beggar, and I never will be. To die is so much easier." Alas, after that flourish of trumpets, when he came with a sack of flour, I accepted it gratefully. I receive things I can not pay for, but money is different. There I draw a line, imaginary, perhaps. Once before the same thing happened. Our letters of credit came slowly in 1845, when we went unexpectedly to Europe, and our letters were to follow us. I was a poor little inoffensive bride, and a British officer, who guessed our embarrassment, for we did not tell him he came over with us on the ship asked my husband to draw on his banker until the letters of credit should arrive. It was a nice thing for a stranger to do. We have never lost what we never had. We have never had any money, only unlimited credit, for my husband's richest kind of a father insured us all manner of credit. It was all a mirage only at last, and it has gone, just as we drew nigh to it. Colonel Childs says 8 of our Senators are for Reconstruction, and that a ray of light has penetrated inward from Lincoln, who told Judge Campbell that Southern land would not be confiscated. March 12th. Better to day. A long, long, weary day in grief has passed away. I suppose General Chesnut is somewhere, but where? That is the question. Only once has he visited this sad spot, which holds, he says, all that he cares for on earth. Unless he comes or writes soon, I will cease, or try to cease, this wearisome looking for him. March 13th. My husband at last did come for a visit of 2 hours. Brought Lawrence, who had been to Camden, and was there, indeed, during the raid. My husband has been ordered to Chester, South Carolina. We are surprised to see by the papers that we behaved heroically in leaving everything we had to be destroyed without one thought of surrender. We had not thought of ourselves from the heroic point of view. Isaac McLaughlin hid and saved everything we trusted him with. A grateful negro is Isaac. March 15th. Lawrence says Miss Chesnut is very proud of the presence of mind and cool self possession she showed in the face of the enemy. She lost, after all, only 2 bottles of champagne, 2 of her brother's gold-headed canes, and her brother's horses, including Claudia, the brood mare, that he valued beyond price, and her own carriage, and a flybrush boy called Battis, whose occupation in life was to stand behind the table with his peacock feathers and brush the flies away. He was the sole member of his dusky race at Mulberry who deserted "Ole Marster" to follow the Yankees. Now for our losses at the Hermitage. Added to the gold-headed canes and Claudia, we lost every mule and horse, and President Davis's beautiful Arabian was captured. John's were there, too. My light dragoon, Johnny, and heavy swell, is stripped light enough for the fight now. Jonathan, whom we trusted, betrayed us, and the plantation and mills, Mulberry House, etc., were saved by Claiborne, that black rascal, who was suspected by all the world. Claiborne boldly affirmed that Mr. Chesnut would not be hurt by destroying his place; the invaders would hurt only the negroes. "Mars Jeems," said he, "hardly ever come here, and he takes only a little somep'n nuh to eat, when he do come." Fever continuing, I sent for San Julian Ravenel. We had a wrangle over the slavery question. Then he fell foul of everybody who had not conducted this war according to his ideas. Ellen had something nice to offer him, thanks to the ever bountiful Childs, but he was too angry, too anxious, too miserable to eat. He pitched into Ellen after he had disposed of me. Ellen stood glaring at him from the fireplace, her blue eye nearly white, her other eye blazing as a comet. Last Sunday he gave her some Dover's powders for me. Directions were written on the paper in which the medicine was wrapped, and he told her to show these to me, then to put what I should give her into a wine glass and let me drink it. Ellen put it all into the wine glass and let me drink it at one dose. "It was enough to last you your lifetime," he said. "It was murder." Turning to Ellen. What did you do with the directions?" "I never see no directions. You never give me none." "I told you to show that paper to your mistress." "Well, I flung dat old brown paper in de fire. What you making all dis fuss for? Soon as I give Missus de physic she stop frettin' and flingin' 'bout, she go to sleep sweet as a sucklin' baby, and she slep' 2 days and nights, and now she heap better." And Ellen withdrew from the controversy. "Well, all is well that ends well, Mrs. Chesnut. You took opium enough to kill several persons. You were worried out and needed rest. You came near getting it, thoroughly. You were in no danger from your disease, but your doctor and your nurse combined were deadly." Maybe I was saved by the adulteration, the feebleness of Confederate medicine. A letter from my husband, written at Chester Court House on March 15th, says: "In the morning I send Lieutenant Ogden with Lawrence to Lincolnton to bring you down. I have 3 vacant rooms, one with bedsteads, chairs, washstands, basins, and pitchers, the 2 others bare. You can have half of a kitchen for your cooking. I have also at Dr. Da Vega's a room, furnished, to which you are invited, board also. You can take your choice. If you can get your friends in Lincolnton to assume charge of your valuables, only bring such as you may need here. Perhaps it will be better to bring bed and bedding and the other indispensables." End of chapter 19. Chapter 20, Part 1 of A Diary from Dixie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut. Chapter 20. Chester, South Carolina, March 21, 1865 to May 1, 1865. Part 1. Chester, South Carolina, March 21, 1865. Another flitting has occurred. Captain Ogden came for me. The splendid Childs was true as steel to the last. Surely he is the kindest of men. Captain Ogden was slightly incredulous when I depicted the wonders of Colonel Childs's generosity. So I skilfully led out the good gentleman for inspection, and he walked to the train with us. He offered me Confederate money, silver, and gold, and finally offered to buy our cotton and pay us now in gold. Of course I laughed at his overflowing bounty and accepted nothing, but I begged him to come down to Chester or Camden and buy our cotton of General Chesnut there. On the train after leaving Lincolnton, as Captain Ogden is a refugee, has had no means of communicating with his home since New Orleans fell, and was sure to know how refugees contrive to live, I beguiled the time acquiring information from him. "When people are without a cent, how do they live?" I asked. "I am about to enter the noble band of homeless, houseless refugees, and Confederate pay does not buy one's shoestrings." To which he replied, "Sponge! Sponge! Why did you not let Colonel Childs pay your bills?" "I have no bills," said I. "We have never made bills anywhere, not even at home, where they would trust us, and nobody would trust me in Lincolnton." "Why did you not borrow his money? General Chesnut could pay him at his leisure." "I am by no means sure General Chesnut will ever again have any money," said I. As the train rattled and banged along, and I waved my handkerchief in farewell to Miss Middleton, Isabella, and other devoted friends, I could only wonder if fate would ever throw me again with such kind, clever, agreeable, congenial companions. The McLeans refused to be paid for their rooms. No plummet can sound the depths of the hospitality and kindness of the North Carolina people. Misfortune dogged us from the outset. Everything went wrong with the train. We broke down within 2 miles of Charlotte, and had to walk that distance, which was pretty rough on an invalid barely out of a fever. My spirit was further broken by losing an invaluable lace veil, which was worn because I was too poor to buy a cheaper one; that is, if there were any veils at all for sale in our region. My husband had ordered me to a house in Charlotte kept by some great friends of his. They established me in the drawing room, a really handsome apartment. They made up a bed there and put in a washstand and plenty of water, with everything refreshingly clean and nice. But it continued to be a public drawing room, open to all, so that I was half dead at night and wanted to go to bed. The piano was there, and the company played it. The landlady announced, proudly, that for supper there were 9 kinds of custard. Custard sounded nice and light, so I sent for some, but found it heavy potato pie. I said, "Ellen, this may kill me, though Dover's powder did not." "Don't you believe dat, Missis. Try." We barricaded ourselves in the drawing room that night, and left the next day at dawn. Arrived at the station, we had another disappointment. The train was behind time. There we sat on our boxes 9 long hours, for the cars might come at any moment, and we dared not move an inch from the spot. Finally the train rolled in, overloaded with paroled prisoners, but Heaven helped us. A kind mail agent invited us, with 2 other forlorn women, into his comfortable and clean mail car. Ogden, true to his theory, did not stay at the boarding house as we did. Some Christian acquaintances took him in for the night. This he explained with a grin. My husband was at the Chester station with a carriage. We drove at once to Mrs. Da Vega's. March 24th. I have been ill, but what could you expect? My lines, however, have again fallen in pleasant places. Mrs. Da Vega is young, handsome, and agreeable, a kind and perfect hostess, and as to the house, my room is all that I could ask and leaves nothing to be desired, so very fresh, clean, warm, and comfortable is it. It is the drawing room suddenly made into a bedroom for me, but it is my very own. We are among the civilized of the earth once more. March 27th. I have moved again, and now I am looking from a window high, with something more to see than the sky. We have the 3rd story of Dr. Da Vega's house, which opens on the straight street that leads to the railroad about a mile off. Mrs. Bedon is the loveliest of young widows. Yesterday at church Isaac Hayne nestled so close to her cap strings that I had to touch him and say, "Sit up." Josiah Bedon was killed in that famous fight of the Charleston Light Dragoons. The dragoons stood still to be shot down in their tracks, having no orders to retire. They had been forgotten, doubtless, and they scorned to take care of themselves. In this high and airy retreat, as in Richmond, then in Columbia, and then in Lincolnton, my cry is still, if they would only leave me here in peace, and if I were sure things never could be worse with me. Again am I surrounded by old friends. People seem to vie with each other to show how good they can be to me. To day Smith opened the trenches and appeared laden with a tray covered with a snow white napkin. Here was my first help toward housekeeping again. Mrs. Pride has sent a boiled ham, a loaf of bread, a huge pancake; another neighbor coffee already parched and ground, a loaf of sugar already cracked, candles, pickles, and all the other things one must trust to love for now. Such money as we have avails us nothing, even if there were anything left in the shops to buy. We had a jolly luncheon. James Lowndes called, the best of good company. He said of Buck, "She is a queen and ought to reign in a palace. No Prince Charming yet; no man has yet approached her that I think half good enough for her." Then Mrs. Prioleau Hamilton, née Levy, came with the story of family progress, not a royal one, from Columbia here. "Before we left home," said she, "Major Hamilton spread a map of the United States on the table and showed me with his finger where Sherman was likely to go. Womanlike, I demurred. 'But suppose he does not choose to go that way?' 'Pooh, pooh! What do you know of war?' So we set out, my husband, myself, and 2 children, all in one small buggy. The 14th of February we took up our line of march, and straight before Sherman's men for 5 weeks we fled together. By incessant hurrying and scurrying from pillar to post, we succeeded in acting as a sort of avant courier of the Yankee army. Without rest and with much haste, we got here last Wednesday, and here we mean to stay and defy Sherman and his legions. Much the worse for wear were we. The first night their beauty sleep was rudely broken into at Alston with a cry, 'Move on! The Yanks are upon us!' So they hurried on, half awake, to Winnsboro, but with no better luck. There they had to lighten the ship, leave trunks, etc., and put on all sail, for this time the Yankees were only 5 miles behind. 'Whip and spur! Ride for your life!' was the cry. Sherman's objective point seemed to be our buggy," said she, For you know that when we got to Lancaster, Sherman was expected there, and he keeps his appointments. That is, he kept that one. 2 small children were in our chariot, and I began to think of the Red Sea expedition. But we lost no time, and soon we were in Cheraw, clearly out of the track. We thanked God for all His mercies and hugged to our bosoms fond hopes of a bed and bath so much needed by all, especially for the children. At 12 o'clock General Hardee himself knocked us up with word to "March! March!" for "all the blue bonnets are over the border." In mad haste we made for Fayetteville, when they said, "God bless your soul! This is the seat of war now, the battle ground where Sherman and Johnston are to try conclusions." So we harked back, as the hunters say, and cut across country, aiming for this place. Clean clothes, my dear? Never a one except as we took off garment by garment and washed it and dried it by our camp fire, with our loins girded and in haste. I was snug and comfortable all that time in Lincolnton. To day Stephen D. Lee's corps marched through, only to surrender. The camp songs of these men were a heartbreak, so sad, yet so stirring. They would have warmed the blood of an Icelander. The leading voice was powerful, mellow, clear, distinct, pathetic, sweet. So I sat down, as women have done before, when they hung up their harps by strange streams, and I wept the bitterness of such weeping. Music? Away, away! Thou speakest to me of things which in all my long life I have not found, and I shall not find. There they go, the gay and gallant few, doomed, the last gathering of the flower of Southern pride, to be killed, or worse, to a prison. They continue to prance by, light and jaunty. They march with as airy a tread as if they still believed the world was all on their side, and that there were no Yankee bullets for the unwary. What will Joe Johnston do with them now? The Hood melodrama is over, though the curtain has not fallen on the last scene. Cassandra croaks and makes many mistakes, but to day she believes that Hood's stock is going down. When that style of enthusiasm is on the wane, the rapidity of its extinction is miraculous. It is like the snuffing out of a candle, one moment white, then gone forever. No, that is not right; it is the snowflake on the river that is referred to. I am getting things as much mixed as do the fine ladies of society. Lee and Johnston have each fought a drawn battle; only a few more dead bodies lie stiff and stark on an unknown battle field. For we do not so much as know where these drawn battles took place. Teddy Barnwell, after sharing with me my first luncheon, failed me cruelly. He was to come for me to go down to the train and see Isabella pass by. One word with Isabella worth 1,000 ordinary ones. So she has gone by, and I've not seen her. Old Colonel Chesnut refuses to say grace, but as he leaves the table audibly declares, "I thank God for a good dinner." When asked why he did this odd thing, he said, "My way is to be sure of a thing before I return thanks for it." Mayor Goodwin thanked Sherman for promised protection to Columbia. Soon after, the burning began. I received the wife of a post office robber. The poor thing had done no wrong, and I felt so sorry for her. Who would be a woman? Who that fool, a weeping, pining, faithful woman? She hath hard measures still when she hopes kindest, and all her beauty only makes ingrates. March 29th. I was awakened with a bunch of violets from Mrs. Pride. Violets always remind me of Kate and of the sweet south wind that blew in the "Garden of Paradise" part of my life. Then it all came back, the dread unspeakable that lies behind every thought now. Thursday. I find I have not spoken of the box car which held the Preston party that day on their way to York from Richmond. In the party were Mr. and Mrs. Lawson Clay, General and Mrs. Preston and their 3 daughters, Captain Rogers, and Mr. Portman, whose father is an English earl and connected financially and happily with Portman Square. In my American ignorance I may not state Mr. Portman's case plainly. Mr. Portman is, of course, a younger son. Then there was Sally and her baby and wet nurse, with no end of servants, male and female. In this ark they slept, ate, and drank, such being the fortune of war. We were there but a short time, but Mr. Portman, during that brief visit of ours, was said to have eaten 3 luncheons, and the number of his drinks, toddies so called, were counted, too. Mr. Portman's contribution to the larder had been 3 small pigs. They were, however, run over by the train, and made sausage meat of unduly and before their time. General Lee says to the men who shirk duty, "This is the people's war. When they tire, I stop." Wigfall says, "It is all over. The game is up." He is on his way to Texas, and when the hanging begins, he can step over into Mexico. I am plucking up heart; such troops do I see go by every day. They must turn the tide, and surely they are going for something more than surrender. It is very late, and the wind flaps my curtain, which seems to moan, "Too late." All this will end by making me a nervous lunatic. Yesterday, while I was driving with Mrs. Pride, Colonel McCaw passed us. He called out, "I do hope you are in comfortable quarters." "Very comfortable," I replied. "Oh, Mrs. Chesnut," said Mrs. Pride, "how can you say that?" "Perfectly comfortable, and hope it may never be worse with me," said I. "I have a clean little parlor, 16 by 18, with its bare floor well scrubbed, a dinner table, 6 chairs, and well, that is all. But I have a charming lookout from my window high. My world is now thus divided into 2 parts, where Yankees are and where Yankees are not." As I sat disconsolate, looking out, ready for any new tramp of men in arms, the magnificent figure of General Preston hove in sight. He was mounted on a mighty steed, worthy of its rider, followed by his trusty squire, William Walker, who bore before him the General's portmanteau. When I had time to realize the situation, I perceived at General Preston's right hand Mr. Christopher Hampton and Mr. Portman, who passed by. Soon Mrs. Pride, in some occult way, divined or heard that they were coming here, and she sent me at once no end of good things for my tea table. General Preston entered very soon after, and with him Clement Clay, of Alabama, the latter in pursuit of his wife's trunk. I left it with the Rev. Mr. Martin, and have no doubt it is perfectly safe. But where? We have written to Mr. Martin to inquire. Then Wilmot de Saussure appeared. "I am here," he said, "to consult with General Chesnut. He and I always think alike." He added, emphatically, "Slavery is stronger than ever." "If you think so," said I, "you will find that for once you and General Chesnut do not think alike. He has held that slavery was a thing of the past, this many a year." I said to General Preston, "I pass my days and nights partly at this window. I am sure our army is silently dispersing. Men are moving the wrong way, all the time. They slip by with no songs and no shouts now. They have given the thing up. See for yourself; look there." For a while the streets were thronged with soldiers, and then they were empty again. But the marching now is without tap of drum. March 31st. Mr. Prioleau Hamilton told us of a great adventure. Mrs. Preston was put under his care on the train. He soon found the only other women along were "strictly unfortunate females," as Carlyle calls them, beautiful and aggressive. He had to communicate the unpleasant fact to Mrs. Preston on account of their propinquity, and was lost in admiration of her silent dignity, her quiet self possession, her calmness, her deafness and blindness, her thoroughbred ignoring of all that she did not care to see. Some women, no matter how ladylike, would have made a fuss or would have fidgeted, but Mrs. Preston dominated the situation and possessed her soul in innocence and peace. Met Robert Johnston from Camden. He has been a prisoner, having been taken at Camden. The Yankees robbed Zack Cantey of his forks and spoons. When Zack did not seem to like it, they laughed at him. When he said he did not see any fun in it, they pretended to weep and wiped their eyes with their coat tails. All this maddening derision Zack said was as hard to bear as it was to see them ride off with his horse, Albine. They stole all of Mrs. Zack's jewelry and silver. When the Yankee general heard of it, he wrote her a very polite note, saying how sorry he was that she had been annoyed, and returned a bundle of Zack's love letters written to her before she was married. Robert Johnston said Miss Chesnut was a brave and determined spirit. One Yankee officer came in while they were at breakfast, and sat down to warm himself at the fire. Rebels have no rights. Miss Chesnut said to him politely. "I suppose you have come to rob us. Please do so and go. Your presence agitates my blind old father." The man jumped up in a rage and said, "What do you take me for, a robber?" "No, indeed," said she, and for very shame he marched out empty-handed. End of Chapter 20, Part 1. Chapter 20, Part 2 of A Diary from Dixie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut. Chapter 20, Chester, South Carolina, Part 2. April 3d. Saw General Preston ride off. He came to tell me good by. I told him he looked like a crusader on his great white horse, with William, his squire, at his heels. Our men are all consummate riders, and have their servants well mounted behind them, carrying cloaks and traps. How different from the same men packed like sardines in dirty railroad cars, usually floating inch deep in liquid tobacco juice. For the kitchen and Ellen's comfort, I wanted a pine table and a kitchen chair. A woman sold me one to day for 3,000 Confederate dollars. Mrs. Hamilton has been disappointed again. Prelo Hamilton says the person into whose house they expected to move to day came to say she could not take boarders for 3 reasons. First, that they had smallpox in the house. And the 2 others? Oh, I did not ask for the 2 others. April 5th. Miss Middleton's letter came in answer to mine, telling her how generous my friends here were to me. "We long," she says, "for our own small sufficiency of wood, corn, and vegetables. Here is a struggle unto death, although the neighbors would continue to feed us, as you would say, with a spoon. We have fallen upon a new device. We keep a cookery book on the mantelpiece, and when the dinner is deficient we just read off a pudding or a creme. It does not entirely satisfy the appetite, this dessert in imagination, but perhaps it is as good for the digestion." As I was ready to go, though still upstairs, some one came out to say General Hood had called. Mrs. Hamilton cried out, "Send word you are not at home." "Never," said I. "Why make him climb all these stairs when you must go in 5 minutes?" "If he had come here dragging Sherman as a captive at his chariot wheels, I might say not at home, but not now." And I ran down and greeted him on the sidewalk in the face of all, and walked slowly beside him as he toiled up the weary 3 stories, limping gallantly. He was so well dressed and so cordial, not depressed in the slightest. He was so glad to see me. He calls his report self defense, says Joe Johnston attacked him and he was obliged to state things from his point of view. And now follow statements where one may read between the lines what one chooses. He had been offered a command in Western Virginia, but as General Lee was concerned because he and Joe Johnston were not on cordial terms, and as the fatigue of the mountain campaign would be too great for him, he would like the chance of going across the Mississippi. Texas was true to him, and would be his home, as it had voted him a ranch somewhere out there. They say General Lee is utterly despondent and has no plan if Richmond goes, as go it must. April 7th. Richmond has fallen, and I have no heart to write about it. Grant broke through our lines and Sherman cut through them. Stoneman is this side of Danville. They are too many for us. Everything is lost in Richmond, even our archives. Blue black is our horizon. Hood says we shall all be obliged to go West, to Texas, I mean, for our own part of the country will be overrun. Yes, a solitude and a wild waste it may become, but as to that, we can rough it in the bush at home. De Fontaine, in his newspaper, continues the old cry. "Now Richmond is given up," he says. "It was too heavy a load to carry, and we are stronger than ever." Stronger than ever! 9/10 of our army are underground, and where is another army to come from? Will they wait until we grow one? April 15th. What a week it has been! Madness, sadness, anxiety, turmoil, ceaseless excitement. The Wigfalls passed through on their way to Texas. We did not see them. Luley told Hood they were bound for the Rio Grande and intended to shake hands with Maximilian, Emperor of Mexico. Yankees were expected here every minute. Mrs. Davis came. We went down to the cars at daylight to receive her. She dined with me. Lovely Winnie, the baby, came too. Buck and Hood were here, and that queen of women, Mary Darby. Clay behaved like a trump. He was as devoted to Mrs. Davis in her adversity as if they had never quarreled in her prosperity. People sent me things for Mrs. Davis, as they did in Columbia for Mr. Davis. It was a luncheon or breakfast only she stayed for here. Mrs. Brown prepared a dinner for her at the station. I went down with her. She left here at 5 o'clock. My heart was like lead, but we did not give way. She was as calm and smiling as ever. It was but a brief glimpse of my dear Mrs. Davis, and under altered skies. April 17th. A letter from Mrs. Davis, who writes: "Do come to me and see how we get on. I shall have a spare room by the time you arrive, indifferently furnished, but oh, so affectionately placed at your service. You will receive such a loving welcome. One perfect bliss have I. The baby, who grows fat and is smiling always, is christened, and not old enough to develop the world's vices or to be snubbed by it. The name so long delayed is Varina Ann. My name is a heritage of woe." Are you delighted with your husband? I am delighted with him as well as with my own. It is well to lose an Arabian horse if one elicits such a tender and at the same time knightly letter as General Chesnut wrote to my poor old Prometheus. I do not think that for a time he felt the vultures after the reception of the General's letter. I hear horrid reports about Richmond. It is said that all below Ninth Street to the Rockets has been burned by the rabble, who mobbed the town. The Yankee performances have not been chronicled. May God take our cause into His own hands. April 19th. Just now, when Mr. Clay dashed upstairs, pale as a sheet, saying, "General Lee has capitulated," I saw it reflected in Mary Darby's face before I heard him speak. She staggered to the table, sat down, and wept aloud. Mr. Clay's eyes were not dry. Quite beside herself, Mary shrieked, "Now we belong to negroes and Yankees." Buck said, "I do not believe it." How different from ours of them is their estimate of us. How contradictory is their attitude toward us. To keep the despised and iniquitous South within their borders, as part of their country, they are willing to enlist millions of men at home and abroad, and to spend billions. And we know they do not love fighting per se, nor spending money. They are perfectly willing to have 3 killed for our 1. We hear they have all grown rich, though shoddy, whatever that is. Genuine Yankees can make a fortune trading jackknives. "Somehow it is borne in on me that we will have to pay the piper," was remarked to day. No, blood can not be squeezed from a turnip. You can not pour anything out of an empty cup. We have no money, even for taxes, or to be confiscated. While the Preston girls are here, my dining room is given up to them, and we camp on the landing, with our 1 table and 6 chairs. Beds are made on the dining room floor. Otherwise, there is no furniture, except buckets of water and bath tubs in their improvised chamber. Night and day this landing and these steps are crowded with the élite of the Confederacy, going and coming, and when night comes, or rather bedtime, more beds are made on the floor of the landing place for the war-worn soldiers to rest upon. The whole house is a bivouac. As Pickens said of South Carolina in 1861, we are an armed camp. My husband is rarely at home. I sleep with the girls, and my room is given up to soldiers. General Lee's few, but undismayed, his remnant of an army, or the part from the South and West, sad and crestfallen, passed through Chester. Many discomfited heroes find their way up these stairs. They say Johnston will not be caught as Lee was. He can retreat; that is his trade. If he would not fight Sherman in the hill country of Georgia, what will he do but retreat in the plains of North Carolina with Grant, Sherman, and Thomas all to the fore? We are to stay here. Running is useless now, so we mean to bide a Yankee raid, which they say is imminent. Why fly? They are everywhere, these Yankees, like red ants, like the locusts and frogs which were the plagues of Egypt. The plucky way in which our men keep up is beyond praise. There is no howling, and our poverty is made a matter of laughing. We deride our own penury. Of the country we try not to speak at all. April 22d. This yellow Confederate quire of paper, my journal, blotted by entries, has been buried 3 days with the silver sugar dish, teapot, milk jug, and a few spoons and forks that follow my fortunes as I wander. With these valuables was Hood's silver cup, which was partly crushed when he was wounded at Chickamauga. It has been a wild 3 days, with aides galloping around with messages, Yankees hanging over us like a sword of Damocles. We have been in queer straits. We sat up at Mrs. Bedon's dressed, without once going to bed for 48 hours, and we were aweary. Colonel Cadwallader Jones came with a despatch, a sealed, secret despatch. It was for General Chesnut. I opened it. Lincoln, old Abe Lincoln, has been killed, murdered, and Seward wounded. Why? By whom? It is simply maddening, all this. I sent off messenger after messenger for General Chesnut. I have not the faintest idea where he is, but I know this foul murder will bring upon us worse miseries. Mary Darby says, "But they murdered him themselves. No Confederates are in Washington." But if they see fit to accuse us of instigating it? Who murdered him? Who knows? See if they don't take vengeance on us now that we are ruined and can not repel them any longer. The death of Lincoln I call a warning to tyrants. He will not be the last President put to death in the Capitol, though he is the first. Buck never submits to be bored. The bores came to tea at Mrs. Bedon's, and then sat and talked, so prosy, so wearisome was the discourse, so endless it seemed, that we envied Buck, who was mooning on the piazza. She rarely speaks now. April 23d. My silver wedding day, and I am sure the unhappiest day of my life. Mr. Portman came with Christopher Hampton. Portman told of Miss Kate Hampton, who is perhaps the most thoroughly ladylike person in the world. When he told her that Lee had surrendered, she started up from her seat and said, "That is a lie." "Well, Miss Hampton, I tell the tale as it was told me. I can do no more." No wonder John Chesnut is bitter. They say Mulberry has been destroyed by a corps commanded by General Logan. Some one asked coolly, "Will General Chesnut be shot as a soldier or hung as a senator?" "I am not of sufficient consequence," answered he. "They will stop short of brigadiers. I resigned my seat in the United States Senate weeks before there was any secession, so I can not be hung as a senator. But after all, it is only a choice between drumhead court martial, short shrift, and a lingering death at home from starvation." These negroes are unchanged. The shining black mask they wear does not show a ripple of change. They are sphinxes. Ellen has had my diamonds to keep for a week or so. When the danger was over, she handed them back to me with as little apparent interest in the matter as if they had been garden peas. Mrs. Huger was in church in Richmond when the news of the surrender came. Worshippers were in the midst of the communion service. Mr. McFarland was called out to send away the gold from his bank. Mr. Miniger Rhodes' English grew confused. Then the President was summoned, and distress of mind showed itself in every face. The night before, one of General Lee's aides, Walter Taylor, was married, and was off to the wars immediately after the ceremony. 1 year ago we left Richmond. The Confederacy has double-quicked downhill since then. 1 year since I stood in that beautiful Hollywood by little Joe Davis's grave. Now we have burned towns, deserted plantations, sacked villages. "You seem resolute to look the worst in the face," said General Chesnut wearily. "Yes, poverty, with no future and no hope." "But no slaves, thank God!" cried Buck. "We would be the scorn of the world if the world thought of us at all. You see, we are exiles and paupers." Pile on the agony. "How does our famous captain, the great Lee, bear the Yankees' galling chain?" I asked. "He knows how to possess his soul in patience," answered my husband. "If there were no such word as subjugation, no debts, no poverty, no negro mobs backed by Yankees, if all things were well, you would shiver and feel benumbed," he went on, pointing at me in an oratorical attitude. "Your sentence is pronounced: Camden for life." May 1st. In Chester still. I climb these steep steps alone. They have all gone, all passed by. Buck went with Mr. C. Hampton to York. Mary, Mrs. Huger, and Pinckney took flight together. One day just before they began to dissolve in air, Captain Gay was seated at the table, halfway between me on the top step and John in the window, with his legs outside. Said someone to day, "She showed me her engagement ring, and I put it back on her hand. She is engaged, but not to me." By the heaven that is above us all, I saw you kiss her hand. That I deny. Captain Gay glared in angry surprise, and insisted that he had seen it. "Sit down, Gay," said the cool captain in his most mournful way. "You see, my father died when I was a baby, and my grandfather took me in hand. To him I owe this moral maxim. He is 90 years old, a wise old man. Now remember my grandfather's teaching forevermore. A gentleman must not kiss and tell." General Preston came to say good by. He will take his family abroad at once. Burnside, in New Orleans, owes him some money and will pay it. "There will be no more confiscation, my dear madam," said he. "They must see that we have been punished enough." "They do not think so, my dear General. This very day a party of Federals passed in hot pursuit of our President." A terrible fire eater, one of the few men left in the world who believe we have a right divine, being white, to hold Africans, who are black, in bonds forever. He is 6 feet 2, an athlete, a splendid specimen of the animal man, but he has never been under fire; his place in the service was a bomb proof office, so called. With a face red hot with rage he denounced Jeff Davis and Hood. "Come now," said Edward the handsome. "Men who could fight and did not, they are the men who ruined us. We wanted soldiers. If the men who are cursing Jeff Davis now had fought with Hood, and fought as Hood fought, we'd be all right now." And then he told of my trouble one day while Hood was here. "Just such a fellow as you came up on this little platform, and before Mrs. Chesnut could warn him, began to heap insults on Jeff Davis and his satrap, Hood. Mrs. Chesnut held up her hands. 'Stop, not another word. You shall not abuse my friends here. Not Jeff Davis behind his back. Not Hood to his face, for he is in that room and hears you.' Fancy how dumbfounded this creature was. Mrs. Huger told a story of Joe Johnston in his callow days, before he was famous. After an illness Johnston's hair all fell out; not a hair was left on his head, which shone like a fiery cannon ball. One of the gentlemen from Africa who waited at table sniggered so at dinner that he was ordered out by the grave and decorous black butler. General Huger, feeling for the agonies of young Africa, as he strove to stifle his mirth, suggested that Joe Johnston should cover his head with his handkerchief. A red silk one was produced, and, turban shaped, placed on his head. That completely finished the gravity of the butler, who fled in helplessness. His guffaw on the outside of the door became plainly audible. General Huger then suggested, as they must have the waiter back, or the dinner could not go on, that Joe should eat with his hat on, which he did. End of chapter 20. Chapter 21, Part 1 of A Diary from Dixie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut. Chapter 21, Camden, South Carolina, May 2, 1865 to August 2, 1865. Part 1. Camden, South Carolina, May 2, 1865. Since we left Chester, nothing but solitude, nothing but tall, blackened chimneys to show that any man has ever trod this road before. This is Sherman's track. It is hard not to curse him. I wept incessantly at first. The roses of the gardens are already hiding the ruins. My husband said nature is a wonderful renovator. He tried to say something else, and then I shut my eyes and made a vow that if we were a crushed people, crushed by weight, I would never be a whimpering, pining slave. We heard loud explosions of gunpowder in the direction of Camden. Destroyers were at it there. Met William Walker, whom Mr. Preston left in charge of a carload of his valuables. General Preston was hardly out of sight before poor, helpless William had to stand by and see the car plundered. "My dear Missis, they have cleaned me out. nothing left," moaned William the Faithful. "We have 9 armed couriers with us. Can they protect us?" Bade adieu to the staff at Chester. No general ever had so remarkable a staff, so accomplished, so agreeable, so well bred, and, I must say, so handsome, and can add, so brave and efficient. May 4th. Home again at Bloomsbury. From Chester to Winnsboro we did not see one living thing, man, woman, or animal, except poor William trudging home after his sad disaster. The blooming of the gardens had a funereal effect. Nature is so luxuriant here she soon covers the ravages of savages. No frost has occurred since the 7th of March, which accounts for the wonderful advance in vegetation. This seems providential to these starving people. In this climate so much that is edible can be grown in 2 months. At Winnsboro we stayed at Mr. Robertson's. There we left the wagon train. Only Mr. Brisbane, one of the General's couriers, came with us on escort duty. The Robertsons were very kind and hospitable, brimful of Yankee anecdotes. To my amazement the young people of Winnsboro had a May Day celebration amid the smoking ruins. Irrepressible is youth. The fidelity of the negroes is the principal topic. There seems to be not a single case of a negro who betrayed his master, and yet they showed a natural and exultant joy at being free. After we left Winnsboro, negroes were seen in the fields plowing and hoeing corn, just as in antebellum times. The fields in that respect looked quite cheerful. We did not pass in the line of Sherman's savages, and so saw some houses standing. Mary Kirkland has had experience with the Yankees. She has been pronounced the most beautiful woman on this side of the Atlantic, and has been spoiled accordingly in all society. When the Yankees came, Monroe, their negro manservant, told her to stand up and hold 2 of her children in her arms, with the other 2 pressed as close against her knees as they could get. Mammy Selina and Lizzie then stood grimly on each side of their young missus and her children. For 4 mortal hours the soldiers surged through the rooms of the house. Sometimes Mary and her children were roughly jostled against the wall, but Mammy and Lizzie were staunch supporters. The Yankee soldiers taunted the negro women for their foolishness in standing by their cruel slave owners, and taunted Mary with being glad of the protection of her poor ill-used slaves. Monroe, meanwhile, had one leg bandaged and pretended to be lame, so that he might not be enlisted as a soldier, and kept making pathetic appeals to Mary. "Don't answer them back, Miss Mary," said he. "Let 'em say what they want to. Don't answer 'em back. Don't give 'em any chance to say you are impudent to 'em." One man said to her, "Why do you shrink from us and avoid us so? We did not come here to fight for negroes. We hate them. At Port Royal I saw a beautiful white woman driving in a wagon with a coal black negro man. If she had been anything to me I would have shot her through the heart." "Oh, oh!" said Lizzie, "that's the way you talk in here. I'll remember that when you begin outside to beg me to run away with you." Finally, poor Aunt Betsy, Mary's mother, fainted from pure fright and exhaustion. Mary put down her baby and sprang to her mother, who was lying limp in a chair, and fiercely called out, "Leave this room, you wretches! Do you mean to kill my mother? She is ill. I must put her to bed." Without a word they all slunk out ashamed. "If I had only tried that hours ago," she now said. Outside they remarked that she was "an insolent rebel hussy, who thinks herself too good to speak to a soldier of the United States," and one of them said, "Let us go in and break her mouth." But the better ones held the more outrageous back. Monroe slipped in again and said, "Missy, for God's sake, when they come in be sociable with 'em. They will kill you." "Then let me die." The negro soldiers were far worse than the white ones. Mrs. Bartow drove with me to Mulberry. On one side of the house we found every window had been broken, every bell torn down, every piece of furniture destroyed, and every door smashed in. But the other side was intact. Maria Whitaker and her mother, who had been left in charge, explained this odd state of things. The Yankees were busy as beavers, working like regular carpenters, destroying everything, when their general came in and stopped them. He told them it was a sin to destroy a fine old house like that, whose owner was over 90 years old. He would not have had it done for the world. It was wanton mischief. He explained to Maria that soldiers at such times were excited, wild, and unruly. They carried off sacks full of our books, since, unfortunately, they found a pile of empty sacks in the garret. Our books, our letters, our papers were afterward strewn along the Charleston road. Somebody found things of ours as far away as Vance's Ferry. This was Potter's raid. The reference appears to be to General Edward E. Potter, a native of New York City who died in 1889. General Potter entered the Federal service early in the war. He recruited a regiment of North Carolina troops and engaged in operations in North and South Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. Sherman took only our horses. Potter's raid came after Johnston's surrender and ruined us finally, burning our mills and gins and 100 bales of cotton. Indeed, nothing is left to us now but the bare land and the debts contracted for the support of hundreds of negroes during the war. J. H. Boykin was at home at the time to look after his own interests, and he, with John de Saussure, has saved the cotton on their estates, with the mules and farming utensils and plenty of cotton as capital to begin on again. The negroes would be a good riddance. A hired man would be a good deal cheaper than a man whose father and mother, wife, and 12 children have to be fed, clothed, housed, and nursed, their taxes paid, and their doctor's bills, all for his half-done, slovenly, lazy work. For years we have thought negroes a nuisance that did not pay. They pretend exuberant loyalty to us now. Only one man of Mr. Chesnut's left the plantation with the Yankees. When the Yankees found the Western troops were not at Camden, but down below Swift Creek, like sensible folk they came up the other way, and while we waited at Chester for marching orders, we were quickly ruined after the surrender. With our cotton saved, and cotton at $1 a pound, we might be in comparatively easy circumstances. But now it is the devil to pay, and no pitch hot. Well, all this was to be. Goddard Bailey, editor, whose prejudices are all against us, described the raids to me in this wise. They were regularly organized. First came squads who demanded arms and whiskey. Then came the rascals who hunted for silver, ransacked the ladies' wardrobes, and scared women and children into fits, at least those who could be scared. Some of these women could not be scared. Then came some smiling, suave, well-dressed officers who regretted it all so much. Outside the gate, officers, men, and bummers divided even, share and share alike, the piles of plunder. When we crossed the river coming home, the ferryman at Chesnut's Ferry asked for his fee. Among us all we could not muster the small silver coin he demanded. There was poverty for you. Nor did a stiver appear among us until Molly was hauled home from Columbia, where she was waging war with Sheriff Dent's family. As soon as her foot touched her native heath, she sent to hunt up the cattle. Many of our cows were found in the swamp. Like Marion's men, they had escaped the enemy. Molly sells butter for us now on shares. Old Cuffey, head gardener at Mulberry, and Yella Abram, his assistant, have gone on in the even tenor of their way. Men may come and men may go, but they dig on forever. And they say they mean to, as long as old master is alive. We have green peas, asparagus, lettuce, spinach, new potatoes, and strawberries in abundance, enough for ourselves and plenty to give away to refugees. It is early in May, and yet 2 months since frost. Surely the wind was tempered to the shorn lamb in our case. Johnny went over to see Hampton. His cavalry are ordered to reassemble on the 20th. A little farce to let themselves down easily. They know it is all over. Johnny, smiling serenely, said, "The thing is up and forever." Goddard Bailey has presence of mind. Anne Sabb left a gold card case, which was a terrible oversight, among the cards on the drawing room table. When the Yankee raiders saw it, their eyes glistened. Goddard whispered to her, "Let them have that gilt thing, and slip away and hide the silver." "No!" shouted a Yank. "You don't fool me that way. Here's your old brass thing. Don't you stir. Fork over that silver." And so they deposited the gold card case in Goddard's hands and stole plated spoons and forks, which had been left out because they were plated. Mrs. Beach says 2 officers slept at her house. Each had a pillow case crammed with silver and jewelry. "Spoils of war," they called it. Floride Canty heard an old negro say to his master, "When you all had the power you was good to me, and I'll protect you now. No niggers nor Yankees shall touch you. If you want anything, call for Sambo. Call for Mr. Samuel. Dat my name now." May 10th. A letter from a Pharisee who thanks the Lord she is not as other women are. She need not pray, as the Scotch parson did, for a good conceit of herself. She writes, "I feel that I will not be ruined. Come what may, God will provide for me." But her husband had strengthened the Lord's hands, and, for the glory of God, doubtless, invested some thousands of dollars in New York, where Confederate moth did not corrupt, nor Yankee bummers break through and steal. She went on to tell us, "I have had the good things of this world, and I have enjoyed them in their season. But I only held them as steward for God. My bread has been cast upon the waters and will return to me." E. M. Boykin said to day, "We had a right to strike for our independence, and we did strike a bitter blow." They must be proud to have overcome such a foe. I dare look any man in the face. There is no humiliation in our position after such a struggle as we made for freedom from the Yankees. He is sanguine. His main idea is joy that he has no negroes to support, and need hire only those he really wants. Stephen Elliott told us that Sherman said to Joe Johnston, "Look out for yourself. This agreement only binds the military, not the civil authorities." Is our destruction to begin anew? For a few weeks we have had peace. Sally Reynolds told a short story of a negro pet of Mrs. Kershaw's. The little negro clung to Mrs. Kershaw and begged her to save him. The negro mother, stronger than Mrs. Kershaw, tore him away from her. Mrs. Kershaw wept bitterly. Sally said she saw the mother chasing the child before her as she ran after the Yankees, whipping him at every step. The child yelled like mad, a small rebel blackamoor. May 16th. We are scattered and stunned, the remnant of heart left alive within us filled with brotherly hate. We sit and wait until the drunken tailor who rules the United States of America issues a proclamation and defines our anomalous position. Such a hue and cry, but whose fault? Everybody is blamed by somebody else. The dead heroes left stiff and stark on the battlefield escape, blame every man who stayed at home and did not fight. I will not stop to hear excuses. There is not one word against those who stood out until the bitter end and stacked muskets at Appomattox. May 18th. A feeling of sadness hovers over me now, day and night, which no words of mine can express. There is a chance for plenty of character study in this Mulberry house, if one only had the heart for it. Colonel Chesnut, now 93, blind and deaf, is apparently as strong as ever, and certainly as resolute of will. Partly patriarch, partly grand seigneur, this old man is of a species that we shall see no more, the last of a race of lordly planters who ruled this Southern world, but now a splendid wreck. His manners are unequaled still, but underneath this smooth exterior lies the grip of a tyrant whose will has never been crossed. I will not attempt what Lord Byron says he could not do, but must quote again, "Everybody knows a gentleman when he sees him. I have never met a man who could describe one." We have had three very distinct specimens of the genus in this house, three generations of gentlemen, each utterly different from the other, father, son, and grandson. African Scipio walks at Colonel Chesnut's side. He is 6 feet 2, a black Hercules, and as gentle as a dove in all his dealings with the blind old master, who boldly strides forward, striking with his stick to feel where he is going. The Yankees left Scipio unmolested. He told them he was absolutely essential to his old master, and they said, "If you want to stay so bad, he must have been good to you always." Scip says he was silent, for "it made them mad if you praised your master." Sometimes this old man will stop himself, just as he is going off in a fury, because they try to prevent his attempting some feat impossible in his condition of lost faculties. He will ask gently, "I hope that I never say or do anything unseemly. Sometimes I think I am subject to mental aberrations." At every footfall he calls out, "Who goes there?" If a lady's name is given, he uncovers and stands, with his hat off, until she passes. He still has the old world art of bowing low and gracefully. Colonel Chesnut came of a race that would brook no interference with their own sweet will by man, woman, or devil. But then such manners has he, they would clear any man's character, if he needed it. Mrs. Chesnut, his wife, used to tell us that when she met him at Princeton in the 90's of the 18th century, They called him the young prince. He and Mr. John Taylor, of Columbia, were the first up country youths whose parents were wealthy enough to send them off to college. Footnote: John Taylor was graduated from Princeton in 1790 and became a planter in South Carolina. He served in Congress from 1806 to 1810, and in the latter year was chosen to fill a vacancy in the United States Senate caused by the resignation of Thomas Sumter. In 1826 he was chosen Governor of South Carolina. He died in 1832. End footnote. When a college was established in South Carolina, Colonel John Chesnut, the father of the aforesaid young prince, was on the first board of trustees. Indeed, I may say that since the Revolution of 1776 there has been no convocation of the notables of South Carolina, in times of peace and prosperity, or of war and adversity, in which a representative man of this family has not appeared. The estate has been kept together until now. Mrs. Chesnut said she drove down from Philadelphia on her bridal trip in a chariot and four, a cream colored chariot with outriders. They have a saying here, on account of the large families with which people are usually blessed, and the subdivision of property consequent upon that fact, besides the tendency of one generation to make and to save, and the next to idle and to squander, that there are rarely more than 3 generations between shirt sleeves and shirt sleeves. But these Chesnuts have secured 4, from the John Chesnut who was driven out from his father's farm in Virginia by the French and Indians, when that father had been killed at Fort Duquesne, to the John Chesnut who saunters along here now, the very perfection of a lazy gentleman, who cares not to move unless it be for a fight, a dance, or a fox hunt. Footnote: Fort Duquesne stood at the junction of the Monongahela and Allegheny rivers. Captain Trent, acting for the Ohio Company, with some Virginia militiamen, began to build this fort in February, 1754. On April 17th of the same year, 700 Canadians and French forced him to abandon the work. The French then completed the fortress and named it Fort Duquesne. The unfortunate expedition of General Braddock, in the summer of 1755, was an attempt to retake the fort, Braddock's defeat occurring 8 miles east of it. In 1758 General Forbes marched westward from Philadelphia and secured possession of the place, after the French, alarmed at his approach, had burned it. Forbes gave it the name of Pittsburg. End footnote. The first comer of that name to this State was a lad when he arrived after leaving his land in Virginia, and being without fortune otherwise, he went into Joseph Kershaw's grocery shop as a clerk, and the Kershaws, I think, so remember that fact that they have it on their coat of arms. Our Johnny, as he was driving me down to Mulberry yesterday, declared himself delighted with the fact that the present Joseph Kershaw had so distinguished himself in our war that they might let the shop of 100 years ago rest for a while. "Upon my soul," cried the cool captain, "I have a desire to go in there and look at the Kershaw tombstones. I am sure they have put it on their marble tablets that we had an ancestor one day 100 years ago who was a clerk in their shop." This clerk became a captain in the Revolution. In the second generation the shop had so far sunk that the John Chesnut of that day refused to let his daughter marry a handsome, dissipated Kershaw, and she, a spoiled beauty, who could not endure to obey orders when they were disagreeable to her, went up to her room and therein remained, never once coming out of it for 40 years. Her father let her have her own way in that. He provided servants to wait upon her and every conceivable luxury that she desired, but neither party would give in. I am, too, thankful that I am an old woman, 42 my last birthday. There is so little life left in me now to be embittered by this agony. "Nonsense! I am a pauper," says my husband, "and I am as smiling and as comfortable as ever you saw me." "When you have to give up your horses, how then?" End of chapter 21, part 1. Chapter 21, Part 2 of A Diary from Dixie. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Laurie Ann Walden. A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut. Chapter 21, Camden, South Carolina, Part 2. May 21st. They say Governor McGrath has absconded, and that the Yankees have said, "If you have no visible governor, we will send you one." If we had one and they found him, they would clap him in prison instanter. The negroes have flocked to the Yankee squad which has recently come, but they were snubbed, the rampant freedmen. "Stay where you are," say the Yanks. "We have nothing for you." And they sadly peruse their way. Now that they have picked up that word peruse, they use it in season and out. When we met Mrs. Preston's William, we asked, "Where are you going?" "Perusing my way to Columbia," he answered. When the Yanks said they had no rations for idle negroes, John Walker answered mildly, "This is not at all what we expected." The colored women, dressed in their gaudiest array, carried bouquets to the Yankees, making the day a jubilee. But in this house there is not the slightest change. Every negro has known for months that he or she was free, but I do not see one particle of change in their manner. They are, perhaps, more circumspect, polite, and quiet, but that is all. Otherwise all goes on in antebellum statu quo. Every day I expect to miss some familiar face, but so far have been disappointed. Mrs. Huger we found at the hotel here, and we brought her to Bloomsbury. She told us that Jeff Davis was traveling leisurely with his wife 12 miles a day, utterly careless whether he were taken prisoner or not, and that General Hampton had been paroled. Fighting Dick Anderson and Stephen Elliott, of Fort Sumter memory, are quite ready to pray for Andy Johnson and to submit to the powers that be. Not so our belligerent clergy. "Pray for people when I wish they were dead?" cries Reverend Mr. Trapier. "No, never! I will pray for President Davis till I die. I will do it to my last gasp. My chief is a prisoner, but I am proud of him still. He is a spectacle to gods and men. He will bear himself as a soldier, a patriot, a statesman, a Christian gentleman. He is the martyr of our cause." And I replied with my tears. "Look here, taken in woman's clothes?" asked Mr. Trapier. "Rubbish, stuff, and nonsense. If Jeff Davis has not the pluck of a true man, then there is no courage left on this earth. If he does not die game, I give it up. Something, you see, was due to Lincoln and the Scotch cap that he hid his ugly face with, in that express car, when he rushed through Baltimore in the night. It is that escapade of their man Lincoln that set them on making up the woman's clothes story about Jeff Davis." Mrs. W. drove up. She, too, is off for New York to sell 400 bales of cotton and a square, or something, which pays tremendously in the Central Park region, and to capture and bring home her belle fille, who remained North during the war. She knocked at my door. The day was barely dawning. I was in bed, and as I sprang up discovered that my old Confederate nightgown had to be managed, it was so full of rents. I am afraid I gave undue attention to the sad condition of my gown, but could nowhere see a shawl to drape my figure. She was very kind. In case my husband was arrested and needed funds, she offered me some British securities and bonds. We were very grateful, but we did not accept the loan of money, which would have been almost the same as a gift, so slim was our chance of repaying it. But it was a generous thought on her part, I own that. Went to our plantation, the Hermitage, yesterday. Saw no change; not a soul was absent from his or her post. I said, "Good colored folks, when are you going to kick off the traces and be free?" In their furious, emotional way, they swore devotion to us all to their dying day. Just the same, the minute they see an opening to better themselves, they will move on. William, my husband's foster brother, came up. "Well, William, what do you want?" asked my husband. "Only to look at you, Master. It does me good." June 1st. The New York Herald quotes General Sherman as saying, "Columbia was burned by Hampton's sheer stupidity." But then, who burned everything on the way in Sherman's march to Columbia and in the line of march Sherman took after leaving Columbia? We came, for 3 days of travel, over a road that had been laid bare by Sherman's torches. Nothing but smoking ruins was left in Sherman's track. That I saw with my own eyes. No living thing was left, no house for man or beast. They who burned the countryside for a belt of 40 miles, did they not also burn the town? To charge that to Hampton's stupidity is merely an afterthought. This Herald announces that Jeff Davis will be hanged at once, not so much for treason as for his assassination of Lincoln. Stanton, the Herald says, has all the papers in his hands to convict him. The Yankees here say, "The black man must go as the red man has gone. This is a white man's country." The negroes want to run with the hare, but hunt with the hounds. They are charming in their professions to us, but declare that they are to be paid by these blessed Yankees in lands and mules for having been slaves. They were so faithful to us during the war, why should the Yankees reward them? To which the only reply is that it would be by way of punishing rebels. Mrs. Adger saw a Yankee soldier strike a woman, and she prayed God to take him in hand according to his deed. The soldier laughed in her face, swaggered off, stumbled down the steps, and then his revolver went off by the concussion and shot him dead. Elizabeth K. Adger, wife of the Rev. John B. Adger, D.D., of Charleston, a distinguished Presbyterian divine, at one time a missionary to Smyrna, where he translated the Bible into the Armenian tongue. He was afterward and before the war a professor in the theological seminary at Columbia. His wife was a woman of unusual judgment and intelligence, sharing her husband's many hardships and notable experiences in the East. The black ball is in motion. Mrs. de Saussure's cook shook the dust off her feet and departed from her kitchen to day. Free, she said. The washerwoman is packing to go. Scipio Africanus, the Colonel's body servant, is a soldierly looking black creature, fit to have delighted the eyes of old Frederick William of Prussia, who liked giants. We asked him how the Yankees came to leave him. "Oh, I told them Marster couldn't do without me nohow, and then I carried them some nice hams that they never could have found, they were hid so good." Eben dressed himself in his best and went at a run to meet his Yankee deliverers, so he said. At the gate he met a squad coming in. He had adorned himself with his watch and chain like the cordage of a ship, with a handful of gaudy seals. He knew the Yankees came to rob white people, but he thought they came to save niggers. "Hand over that watch," they said. Minus his fine watch and chain, Eben returned a sadder and a wiser man. He was soon in his shirt sleeves whistling at his knife board. "Why, you here? Why did you come back so soon?" he was asked. "Well, I thought maybe I better stay with old marster that give me the watch and not go with them that stole it." The watch was the pride of his life. The iron had entered his soul. Went up to my old house, Kamschatka. The Trapiers live there now. And those drawing rooms where the children played Puss in Boots, where we have so often danced and sung, but never prayed before, Mr. Trapier held his prayer meeting. I do not think I ever did as much weeping or as bitter in the same space of time. I let myself go; it did me good. I cried with a will. He prayed that we might have strength to stand up and bear our bitter disappointment, to look on our ruined homes and our desolated country and be strong. And he prayed for the man we elected to be our ruler and guide. We knew that they had put him in a dungeon and in chains. Men watch him day and night. Mr. Davis, while encamped near Irwinsville, Georgia, had been captured on May 10th by a body of Federal cavalry under Lieutenant Colonel Pritchard. He was taken to Fortress Monroe and confined there for 2 years, his release being effected on May 13, 1867, when he was admitted to bail in the sum of $100,000, the first name on his bail bond being that of Horace Greeley. By orders of Andy, the bloody-minded tailor, nobody above the rank of colonel can take the benefit of the amnesty oath, nobody who owns over $20,000, or who has assisted the Confederates. And now, ye rich men, howl, for your misery has come upon you. You are beyond the outlaw, camping outside. Howell Cobb and R.M.T. Hunter have been arrested. Our turn will come next, maybe. A Damocles sword hanging over a house does not conduce to a pleasant life. June 12th. Andy, made lord of all by the madman Booth, says, "Destruction only to the wealthy classes." Better teach the negroes to stand alone before you break up all they leaned on, O Yankees. After all, the number who possess over $20,000 are very few. Andy has shattered some fond hopes. He denounces Northern men who came South to espouse our cause. They may not take the life giving oath. My husband will remain quietly at home. He has done nothing that he had not a right to do, nor anything that he is ashamed of. He will not fly from his country, nor hide anywhere in it. These are his words. He has a huge volume of Macaulay, which seems to absorb him. Slyly I slipped Silvio Pellico in his way. He looked at the title and moved it aside. "Oh," said I only wanted you to refresh your memory as to a prisoner's life, and what a despotism can do to make its captives happy." Two weddings. In Camden, Ellen Douglas Ancrum to Mr. Lee, engineer and architect, a clever man, which is the best investment now. In Columbia, Sally Hampton and John Cheves Haskell, the bridegroom a brave one armed soldier. A wedding to be. Lou McCord's, and Mrs. McCord is going about frantically looking for eggs to mix and make into wedding cake, and finding none. She now drives the funniest little one mule vehicle. I have been ill since I last wrote in this journal. Serena's letter came. She says they have been visited by bushwhackers, the roughs that always follow in the wake of an army. My sister Kate they forced back against the wall. She had Katie, the baby, in her arms, and Miller, the brave boy, clung to his mother, though he could do no more. They tried to pour brandy down her throat. They knocked Mary down with the butt end of a pistol, and Serena they struck with an open hand, leaving the mark on her cheek for weeks. Mr. Christopher Hampton says in New York people have been simply intoxicated with the fumes of their own glory. Military prowess is a new wrinkle of delight to them. They are mad with pride that 10 to 1 they could, after 5 years' hard fighting, prevail over us, handicapped, as we were, with a majority of aliens, quasi foes, and negro slaves whom they tried to seduce, shut up with us. They pay us the kind of respectful fear the British meted out to Napoleon when they sent him off with Sir Hudson Lowe to St. Helena, the lone rock by the sea, to eat his heart out where he could not alarm them more. Of course, the Yankees know and say they were too many for us, and yet they would all the same prefer not to try us again. Would Wellington be willing to take the chances of Waterloo once more, with Grouchy, Blücher, and all that left to haphazard? Wigfall said to old Cameron in 1861, "Then you will a sutler be, and profit shall accrue." Simon Cameron became Secretary of War in Lincoln's administration on March 4, 1861. On January 11, 1862, he resigned and was made Minister to Russia. Christopher Hampton says that in some inscrutable way in the world North everybody has contrived to amass fabulous wealth by this war. There are two classes of vociferous sufferers in this community. 1. Those who say, "If people would only pay me what they owe me." 2. Those who say, "If people would only let me alone, I can not pay them. I could stand it if I had anything with which to pay debts." Now we belong to both classes. Heavens, the sums people owe us and will not, or cannot, pay would settle all our debts 10 times over and leave us in easy circumstances for life. But they will not pay. How can they? We are shut in here, turned with our faces to a dead wall. No mails. A letter is sometimes brought by a man on horseback, traveling through the wilderness made by Sherman. All railroads have been destroyed, and the bridges are gone. We are cut off from the world, here to eat out our hearts. Yet from my window I look out on many a gallant youth and maiden fair. The street is crowded, and it is a gay sight. Camden is thronged with refugees from the low country, and here they disport themselves. They call the walk in front of Bloomsbury "the Boulevard." H. Lang tells us that poor Sandhill Millie Trimlin is dead, and that as a witch she had been denied Christian burial. 3 times she was buried in consecrated ground in different churchyards, and 3 times she was dug up by a superstitious horde, who put her out of their holy ground. Where her poor, old, ill-used bones are lying now, I do not know. I hope her soul is faring better than her body. She was a good, kind creature. Why supposed to be a witch? That H. Lang could not elucidate. Everybody in our walk of life gave Millie a helping hand. She was a perfect specimen of the Sandhill tacky race, sometimes called country crackers. Her skin was yellow and leathery, even the whites of her eyes were bilious in color. She was stumpy, strong, and lean, hard-featured, horny-fisted. Never were people so aided in every way as these Sandhillers. Why do they remain Sandhillers from generation to generation? Why should Millie never have bettered her condition? My grandmother lent a helping hand to her grandmother. My mother did her best for her mother, and I am sure the so called witch could never complain of me. As long as I can remember, gangs of these sandhill women traipsed in with baskets to be filled by charity, ready to carry away anything they could get. All are made on the same pattern, more or less alike. They were treated as friends and neighbors, not as beggars. They were asked in to take seats by the fire, and there they sat for hours, stony-eyed, silent, wearing out human endurance and politeness. But their husbands and sons, whom we never saw, were citizens and voters. When patience was at its last ebb, they would open their mouths and loudly demand whatever they had come to seek. One called Judy Bradley, a one-eyed virago, who played the fiddle at all the sandhill dances and fandangos, made a deep impression on my youthful mind. Her list of requests was always rather long, and once my grandmother grew restive and actually hesitated. "Woman, do you mean to let me starve?" she cried furiously. My grandmother then attempted a meek lecture as to the duty of earning one's bread. Judy squared her arms akimbo and answered, "And pray, who made you a judge of the world? Lord, Lord, if I had a knowed I had to stand all this jaw, I wouldn't 'a' took your old things." But she did take them, and came afterward again and again. June 27th. An awful story from Sumter. An old gentleman, who thought his son dead or in a Yankee prison, heard some one try the front door. It was about midnight, and these are squally times. He called out, "What is that?" There came no answer. After a while he heard some one trying to open a window, and he fired. The house was shaken by a fall. Then after a long time of dead silence he went round the house to see if his shot had done any harm, and found his only son bathed in his own blood on his father's doorstep. The son was just back from a Yankee prison, one of his companions said, and had been made deaf by cold and exposure. He did not hear his father hail him. He had tried to get into the house in the same old way he used to employ when a boy. My sister in law in tears of rage and despair, her servants all gone to a big meeting at Mulberry, though she had made every appeal against their going. "Send them adrift," some one said. "They do not obey you or serve you; they only live on you." It would break her heart to part with one of them. But that sort of thing will soon right itself. They will go off to better themselves. We have only to cease paying wages, and that is easy, for we have no money. July 4th. Saturday I was in bed with one of my worst headaches. Occasionally there would come a sob, and I thought of my sister insulted and my little sweet Williams. Another of my beautiful Columbia quartet had rough experiences. A raider asked the plucky little girl, Lizzie Hamilton, for a ring which she wore. "You shall not have it," she said. The man put a pistol to her head, saying, "Take it off, hand it to me, or I will blow your brains out." "Blow away," said she. The man laughed and put down his pistol, remarking, "You knew I would not hurt you." "Of course, I knew you dared not shoot me; even Sherman would not stand that." There was talk of the negroes where the Yankees had been, negroes who flocked to them and showed them where silver and valuables had been hid by the white people. Ladies' maids dressed themselves in their mistresses' gowns before the owners' faces and walked off. Now before this every one had told me how kind, faithful, and considerate the negroes had proven. I am sure, after hearing these tales, the fidelity of my own servants shines out brilliantly. I had taken their conduct too much as a matter of course. In the afternoon I had some business on our place, the Hermitage. John drove me down. Our people were all at home, quiet, orderly, respectful, and at their usual work. In point of fact, things looked unchanged. There was nothing to show that any one of them had even seen the Yankees, or knew that there was one in existence. July 26th. I do not write often now, not for want of something to say, but from a loathing of all I see and hear, and why dwell upon these things? Colonel Chesnut, poor old man, is worse, grows more restless. He seems to be wild with homesickness. He wants to be at Mulberry. When there, he can not see the mighty giants of the forest, the huge, old, wide spreading oaks, but he says he feels that he is there so soon as he hears the carriage rattling across the bridge at the Beaver Dam. I am reading French with Johnny, anything to keep him quiet. We gave a dinner to his company, the small remnant of them, at Mulberry House. About 20 idle negroes, trained servants, came without leave or license and assisted. So there was no expense. They gave their time and labor for a good day's feeding. I think they love to be at the old place. Then I went up to nurse Kate Withers. That lovely girl, barely 18, died of typhoid fever. Tanny wanted his sweet little sister to have a dress for Mary Boykin's wedding, where she was to be one of the bridesmaids. So Tanny took his horses, rode one, and led the other 30 miles in the broiling sun to Columbia, where he sold the led horse and came back with a roll of Swiss muslin. As he entered the door he saw Kate lying there dying. She died praying that she might die. She was weary of earth and wanted to be at peace. I saw her die and saw her put in her coffin. No words of mine can tell how unhappy I am. 6 young soldiers, her friends, were her pallbearers. As they marched out with that burden, sad were their faces. Princess Bright Eyes writes, "Our soldier boys returned, want us to continue our weekly dances." Another maiden fair indites, "Here we have a Yankee garrison. We are told the officers find this the dullest place they were ever in. They want the ladies to get up some amusement for them. They also want to get into society." From Isabella in Columbia, "General Hampton is home again. He looks crushed. How can he be otherwise? His beautiful home is in ruins, and ever present with him must be the memory of the death tragedy which closed forever the eyes of his glorious boy, Preston. Now, there strikes up a serenade to General Ames, the Yankee commander, by a military band, of course. Your last letters have been of the meagerest. What is the matter?" August 2d. Dr. Boykin and John Witherspoon were talking of a nation in mourning, of blood poured out like rain on the battlefields. For what? Never let me hear that the blood of the brave has been shed in vain. No, it sends a cry down through all time. End of Chapter 21. End of A Diary from Dixie by Mary Chesnut.